Because so many in our culture have made marathon running a part of their lives, we no longer marvel at their capacity to run 26 miles. 90% or more of those will finish New York today, and we will not be surprised. But more than ever, we can marvel at the uniquely uplifting atmosphere of this event. The spirit of kinship and support millions of New Yorkers will offer today to marathon superstars like Greta Weitz, 7-time winner of the event, to Rob DiCastella and Orlando Pizzolato, and to the thousands of others who follow in their footprints. ABC Sports presents the New York City Marathon, 1986. There is a look at First Avenue in Manhattan. It has been raining intermittently in New York City since about 5 o'clock Eastern time this morning, but now a heavy fog which had enveloped the city appears to be lifting just a little bit. We may be headed toward a day a little bit warmer than most marathoners would like to experience, and the humidity will be thick despite the fact that the fog is lifting. Good morning. I'm Jim Lampley. Welcome to our 6th year of ABC Sports live coverage of an event which represents one of our most challenging and difficult undertakings of the year, but more to the point, one of the most challenging and difficult undertakings of a lifetime for the 20,000 or so runners who now wait on the shore of Staten Island. You could talk all day about the diversity of this event. Some of the runners make their living from 26-mile races. Some of them will make their one and only such journey today. It's a local event. In fact, among those of us who live and work here on the island of Manhattan, you are hard-pressed to find anyone who doesn't have a friend or relative or business associate in the race. But it's also an international event with entrants from all 50 states and 80 foreign countries. And as we begin to focus in on the favorites, it's important to keep in mind that favorites don't always win marathons. Too many things can happen along the way. Here now, an introduction to 4 of the top men, 4 of those whom we expect you'll be seeing during the course of the day.
The 2-time defending champion in the race is 28-year-old Italian Orlando Pizzolato, whose victories here came against weaker fields than the one he'll face today. It is unlikely he will be able to charge from far back in the field again, because the man he is most likely to chase, Australian Rob DiCastella, is regarded as the strongest of all marathon runners. For DiCastella, the question is how much can he bring to his 3rd major race of the year. His winning time in Boston 6 months ago ranks 3rd on the all-time list, 2 notches above Roble Jama of Djibouti. Jama may be in ideal position to steal a victory here. Faster than Pizzolato, more well-rested than DiCastella, but his only previous marathon this year was disquietingly slow. The local hero, and the man with 2 impressive New York finishes behind him, is Long Islander Pat Peterson. 4th in 84, 3rd in 85, Peterson would like nothing better than to restore some of the lost American presence in big-time marathon running.
Our studio-based expert on the men's races is always Marty LaCourie. And Marty, we've seen some crazy races here in New York.
Especially the last 2 years. 2 years ago when Orlando Pizzolato won the race after stopping 8 times on a very hot day, people thought it was a fluke. He came back incredibly the next year and won the race again after passing 51 people in the second half of the race. Because of that, we've had to institute a Pizzolato watch and try and get back in the pack to find out where he is. But even though he's won 2 years in a row, he's not considered the favorite by most of the media and the runners here. The favorite is Rob DiCastella. Quite simply, the most consistent marathoner in the last decade. So he is here, and this weather today seems to be favoring him. Pizzolato, most people think, will only win if it's hot. He's never won any other marathon except the last 2 years where it's been very hot. Roble Jama, the Djiboutian, has run fast times, but he has never won a race, like his countryman Ahmed Saleh, who was 2nd here last year, 2nd last week in Chicago. So he's not a winner. The same thing with Pat Peterson, the American. He hasn't won a race yet. He's moved up a step each of the last 2 years. According to his coaches, he could get 2nd here. He's one of the best Americans now.
Yes, and of course we should keep in mind that Pizzolato had never won a race before a couple of years ago. So there are at least 3 men who can be considered legitimate possibilities to win the men's race. But on the women's side, most of the attention focuses on the one superstar who has dominated this event in a way few sports events have ever been dominated by one athlete.
If it's New York, the favorite must be Norway's Greta Weitz, who has won this race 7 times. At 33, Weitz may still be improving, as evidenced by the personal best time she posted in London this spring. If she can overcome a summer bout with a knee injury, Weitz will hold a psychological edge over challenger Lisa Martin of Australia. At 26, Martin is still growing into the event, but she proved her ample talent with a fast win at the Commonwealth Games in August and a second-place finish here last year. And it isn't necessarily a two-woman race. Italy's Laura Fogli has been a consistently high finisher here and has the experience to step into the breach should Weitz and Martin break each other down. Fogli's victory at Pittsburgh this year has given her new confidence, but she'll need it to match the superior speed of Weitz and Martin.
And again, our studio-based expert on the women's race is the woman who won it in 1974, Catherine Switzer. Catherine, how do you see it?
Jim, I see the women's race today shaping up to be the most visually and tactically exciting of any New York City Marathon we have seen yet. As you said, Greta Weitz has won this race an amazing 7 times. Now, that's under the best competition in the world often and under the most incredible kinds of conditions. And interestingly, though, that Lisa Martin, who is also very, very competitive because she has won the Commonwealth Games Women's Marathon, the first Commonwealth Games Women's Marathon, has the confidence now to go against Greta. Greta saying that she can finally beat Greta. She has the confidence to do it, that she knows now that she can come from behind, stay with Greta, and win to the end. Unfortunately, we're not going to see many of the top American women runners here because they were, earlier this month, qualifying for the World Championships in the Twin Cities Marathon. But between Lisa Martin and Greta Weitz, I think we can see a very good head-to-head duel.
All right, and both Lisa Martin and Greta Weitz are out at the starting line, as are the other 20,000 who run. There is a look at the finish, right adjacent to the famous restaurant Tavern on the Green in Central Park in Manhattan. Coincidentally, just about 150 yards or so from where our studio is situated here on the west side of Manhattan. We'll be going out to the starting line when we come back.
The 1986 New York City Marathon. This ABC Sports exclusive is brought to you by Mercedes-Benz, automotive sponsor of the New York City Marathon. By Bud Light, everything else is just a light. By The Equitable, your key to financial opportunity. And by Wheat Thins, something like a cracker, but more like a snack.
That starting line on the Staten Island side of the Verrazano Narrows Bridge is quite a distance away from us. In addition to the 3 of us who cover the race from here in the studio, there are 3 more of us who will be covering the race as it happens out on the course. One of them is distance running expert Larry Rawson, who will cover the men's leaders from a special vehicle. Larry, what's the weather like?
Well, Jim, for the 20,000 athletes here, the weather today is truly a mixed blessing. Those runners behind me right now have been facing rain this morning. It, for the moment, has abated here at the starting line, but the forecast is calling for showers all afternoon in the New York area. It was a drizzle much of the time here. The wind is expected to come out of the southwest. It is that direction right now at about 10 or 12 miles per hour. That will be a plus for the runners, as it will help push them through about 75% of the course directly at their backs. The negatives, well, temperature and humidity. The temperature ideally for good marathoning is around 45 degrees, give or take a few, with low humidity. Right now, the temperature is right around 60 degrees, and the humidity a very high 95%, which will help cause loss of a lot of body fluid for these top runners. All in all, a bit of a negative here today. For more flavor here of what's going on at the start, let's go to my colleague, Lynn Swan.
Thank you, Larry. This is my first marathon, so I came out early and mingled with the runners in the holding area. And it was very much like the first day of school. The new runners were much like the freshmen. Excited, glad to be here, but not fully understanding all that's expected of them and all that will happen to them this afternoon. The rest of the runners, like the middle and upperclassmen, a better understanding of what's going to happen, more prepared to finish out this race, mingling with people they've met in marathons in the past. Then I walked into the elite holding area where those people who are here to win the marathon were waiting. And there it was much like the Super Bowl. They were gathering their strength, concentrating, thinking, knowing full well what's expected of them by the public and by themselves. It should be a tremendous race. Covering the women in this race, my friend and colleague, Diana Nyad, who has covered 5 marathons in the past. Diana?
Thank you, Lynn. The focus most definitely among the women is Greta Weitz. Catherine has set the stage for you somewhat. If she can pull it off, this will be her 8th victory here in New York, but for the first time she's got pressure. Not only pressure in the name of Lisa Martin, that tough little Australian, but in the name of injuries. For the first time ever coming into New York, Greta has spent 6 weeks off her legs completely this summer. It's a tremendous amount of time for any runner. She says she's not worried, but this is what she had to say about her hamstring and her knee.
Right now, I have no problems at all, but the knee injury I got came after a hamstring injury. Early summer, I had a hamstring injury and took 3 weeks off, started training again. I was in St. Moritz running in altitude, but I was too eager, did too much too soon, as many other runners do, and ended up with a knee problem. And the knee problem put me off for another 3 weeks. I couldn't run a step, but I kept my condition on the stationary bike, so I didn't lose so much, I hope.
And don't forget that sometimes after a series of injuries, it can work towards your benefit because you're sitting around, you're antsy, your motivation builds back up, and it could be that Greta is very much ready. And I tell you something, she better be. This Lisa Martin says she's unafraid. She says she's learned from her mistakes last year when Greta dropped her cold at the 11-mile mark. She says she's going to stick to her like glue. And we talked to her earlier about her strategy. This is what the Australian Lisa Martin had to say.
Greta is so competitive. I think we'll take the weather into account a little bit. If it's very hot, it would be slower at the start, but I don't think that that will be the case. I have a feeling that she'll try and destroy me as much as she can in the first half, which she did very successfully last year, and boy, did it hurt. I think I'm fitter than I was last year. I think that what I hope is that whatever Greta can do in the first half, that I can match her and that it will hurt her as much as it will hurt me. So basically, I want to keep her in my sights and just key off of her.
Well, right now she has every opportunity to keep Greta in her sights. They are all in the same place, and if you've ever tried to get around New York City, you know that it is no small accomplishment just to get from Manhattan out to the Staten Island side of the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. They didn't just materialize there. Here's what's happened within the past 24 hours. Many of the runners went to the annual pasta party last night, which has now become a race-associated tradition. 2 tons of pasta consumed by runners, some of whom have a heritage which virtually dictates that they eat the stuff, and probably quite frequently, some of whom probably eat it mostly for the process of preparing for a race like this. Then at 5:30 this morning, most of the runners gathered to board buses in front of the New York City Public Library at 42nd Street that many of you have probably seen on your visits to New York. That's the one with the lions out in front of it. And then they rode all the way out to Staten Island on those buses, a time to contemplate what was coming next, a time perhaps to share old times with friends and acquaintances whom they might have met on previous marathon runs. Once they arrived there, there were still several hours to go before the start, which is upcoming. And there's a staging area at the U.S. Army post of Fort Wadsworth, where runners get a chance to drink a cup of coffee, eat a donut or two, do some last-minute stretching and calisthenics, listen to music, and generally try to prepare themselves for what is going to be a very special day in all of their lives, from the fastest right down to the slowest. He'll wake up as we've got the start coming up in just about 4 or 5 minutes. And we'll be coming back to show you that start, one of the most inspiring sights, I think, in all of sports, right after these commercial messages. Well, once again, there is the sight, and I may have been a little bit premature in saying that the fog was lifting, though, of course, that shot is from a long distance and may tend to make the fog look a little thicker than it really is in the eyes of the runners as they mass there at the start. This is quite a nervous time for 20,000 people. Marty LaCourie, I know that you ran the race once, and as we look at today's weather, with once again the temperature at 60, the humidity at 90%, and scattered showers forecast for throughout the day, what were these last couple of minutes like for you?
Well, strangely enough, unless you're an elite runner, you're not thinking about the race. You're thinking about not getting stepped on, and the fact that for many of these people coming from all around the world, and even some of the Americans, they've never been in a crowd like this before. It's a little scary, and as soon as the gun goes off, you feel the ground start shaking. And really, you're thinking about survival, not going down, which is why it's great that the women start over on their own side of the bridge where there are no elite men to get in their way and knock them down.
Speaking of elite women, there she is, Greta Weitz. She always has a semi-taciturn look on her face at this point, Catherine.
Well, you know, Jim, I've wondered about that myself. You wonder why you're so nervous before the start of the race, and that's for 2 reasons. One, there's this tremendous fear of the unknown. Something unknown may happen in the race. And the second is that the knowledge that at some point in the race, there's going to be some pain, and that you have got to run through the pain. Here's the prize money, Jim.
That's what makes the pain worth it for the elite runners. As you can see, the winners receive $25,000 apiece, and then there's a scale going down to $1,000 for 12th place, and there also is a Mercedes-Benz automobile thrown into the deal for the winner, as Mercedes is one of the big sponsors of the race here, among several others. That occasioned a little bit of a controversy early this week, which we'll talk about later on. There is a look at how the field has grown over the years. Hard to believe. Just 16 years ago, 127 people ran in the race when it was entirely held in Central Park. It wasn't until 1976 that it was moved out of the park and into the 5 boroughs, or 1977, I should say. And there they are, as once again they wait for the start of the race, which is coming in just about 1 minute from now. Ever since 1977, the mayor of New York has been the official starter of the race, and most of you, I'm sure, have seen him. His name is Ed Koch, last visible in the dugout of the New York Mets Monday night, as they won the 7th game of the World Series. That cannon, provided by the U.S. Army and Fort Hamilton, is the official starting instrument, and there they go. Starting on both sides of the bridge, there's a slight stagger to account for the fact that the two sides are slightly different in length. They now run 1 mile directly up a fairly steep grade for marathon running and then down the other side. And at this point, Marty, I don't guess they really feel the hill because the exhilaration of finally being underway is so palpable.
No, there's a tremendous amount of adrenaline flowing, and most of the runners, if you ask them after the race, won't realize that this was the toughest mile in the entire race. The first mile is usually the slowest and the toughest, but they don't feel it.
We used the figure roughly 20,000. There were more than 20,000 entry bibs given out. Inevitably, there are some who do not make it to the starting line in Staten Island, some who collect the bibs just to be able to show them to their children or grandchildren and say that they were, in fact, entrants in the New York City Marathon, some who may have injured themselves in last-minute training for the event. There are a lot who are inexperienced and don't know precisely how to prepare for a marathon race. One of the most remarkable statistics, though, I think, which bears repeating, is that as you look at them, we can speculate with some certainty that more than 90% of those people are going to finish the 26-mile, 385-yard run today.
And yet, Jim, you know, 26 miles, 385 yards is still a very, very great distance. Here we are looking at the top women's field. Greta Weitz already has decided to play off in the lead. On her right, her left, our right, in black and white is Lisa Martin, the Australian. And tucked in right between the two of them, stockier of the three women, is Laura Foley from Italy.
Those are the three who we expected to see at the start. There's a good close-up look at the very thin Lisa Martin, a former 400-meter hurdler who made the almost astonishing transfer from intermediate hurdling to distance running just a few years ago. And there are the early men's leaders, Marty, as they take off. And I think we do, in fact, see Roble Jama right back there in the middle of the shot, back just a little bit. Look at the Mets uniform right behind Jama. He must wonder if he's in another world, having come from the nation of Djibouti to run here in New York.
Well, that's Gary Finelli, who's become an institution, and some say should be in an institution, who has a new get-up every year. He's a 2:20 marathoner himself, but he runs New York every year kind of as a joke. One year it's Ghostbusters. This year he's the Mets, and I understand he threw out a baseball just as the gun went off, and he's right in there tucked in between Di Castella and, as you say, Roble Jama. But Pizzolato, #1, is taking the lead. He's changing his tactics from the last two races here in New York.
Well, there's the upset of the day so far, as the noted Silky Sullivan of marathon running, Orlando Pizzolato, has gone to the front right next to Luis Ostalazaga, who is the early leader, number 62. You saw Di Castella wearing bib #1 directly next to Gary Finelli, who couldn't have positioned himself better for the camera between Di Castella and Roble Jama. And this sight needs no words. I meant to say Di Castella #2, of course. Pizzolato is the man who is wearing #1, and Di Castella, as I mentioned, #2, directly next to Gary Finelli, who is next to Jama.
It's interesting that you've done that, because all week people have been referring to Di Castella as the #1 man in the race, and I think we've seen Orlando going out to say, hey, I won it 2 times, I'm here, I want some respect. He ran second in the European Championships, and in that race, he stayed up on the pace. He was one of the leaders, and some of the people around him have said he's got a newfound confidence. He does now believe that he can go out with the leaders in the race, run the first half of the race hard, and hang on to win. So if I were DiCastillo, I would be very surprised at this, that he's right up there on the pace.
Well, Orlando has never run faster than 2 hours, 10 minutes, 23 seconds, which is 2.5 minutes slower than the time DiCastillo posted at Boston earlier this year. But Pete Salato has been quoted this week as saying he's ready to run 2:09, and if somebody's going to beat him, he better be ready to run faster than 2:09.
Certainly many people feel that his performances in the heat were worth much faster times. To just sum it up, Pizzolato was second in the European Championships, but felt that he wasn't quite peaked for that. He expects to run better and be sharper here in New York. In the other case of DiCastillo, he ran very well in Boston, won that, and then won fairly easy in the Commonwealth Games August 1st, and he feels he may be on a little bit of a downward slide, but he thinks it's enough to win here.
I have a little bit of humor about Pete Salato. You know, he said that he was trailing, as we all know. Of course, he was trailing last year in Brooklyn through the Italian section, and all the Italian people said, Orlando, get up in the front. We want you to win. And, of course, he came from behind.
Well, Orlando Pete Salato, as you mentioned, Marty, led for part of the time at the European Championships in Stuttgart, West Germany. And earlier we asked him how that experience was for him.
He was comfortable because when he was in front, I was sure he's feeling strong, and that was great. It was a new experience because usually I was on the back of the pack, but it's two different ways to run. Depends about other runner, about other marathon runner, but I was very good. I feeling very comfortable in front because it's different. You are there to lead the race, and is a great motivation.
The early leaders, DiCastillo looking to his right, checking out the view of Brooklyn from there. Number 34 is Gerhard Hartmann of Austria, a 2:12 marathoner coming in. Number 10, just behind Pete Salato, Johnny Poli, his countryman from Italy. But at the moment, Pete Salato and DiCastillo are where we might have expected them to be about 10 or 12 miles from now for sure, leading the New York City Marathon men's race, while Greta Weitz and Lisa Martin lead the women. We'll be back.
As the marathon begins, entrants have their hearts set on Central Park, but their feet in Staten Island. The Verrazano Narrows Bridge is more than 2 miles long, so most will have burned off their initial euphoria by the time they reach 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, the longest single stretch of thoroughfare on the course. It was here in 1984 that Greta Weitz visibly fought off digestive problems on her way to victory number 6. Here in 1982, our viewers first met cerebral palsy victim Linda Down and the story of her annual marathon triumph. By the time the course crosses the Pulaski Bridge into Queens, half a marathon is done. Queens revealed an unknown Italian named Orlando Pete Salato in 1984, but a little more than an hour later, we knew a lot more about him. And the drama heightens as the leaders cross the 59th Street Bridge into Manhattan, which is what most of us identify as New York. 3 years ago, Great Britain's Jeff Smith took the lead from an African runner named Gadamis Shahanga here, only to lose it to Rod Dixon 11 miles later. But imagine the exhilaration Smith felt in his very first marathon as he led the field onto 1st Avenue, where hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers line up on the sidewalks in front of restaurants and singles bars and reach out to touch their heroes for the day, physically and emotionally. Last year, the massive crowds may have spurred an African named Ahmed Saleh into too fast a pace. He left his best on Manhattan's east side and began to slow down visibly in the relatively empty streets of the South Bronx. From the Bronx, it is back into Manhattan, and the race's final chapters are written in the second largest urban public park in the world. In the footsteps approaching the finish on the park's southwest corner, Rod Dixon vanquished Jeff Smith in one of several dramatic duels. Alberto Salazar once became the fastest marathoner in the world. Norwegian girl named Greta, became an honorary New Yorker. And thousands of men and women, from athletically elite to partially disabled, have found here their holy grail.
And there is a look at the women's leaders. As you can see, the three favorites have separated themselves from the pack. Weitz on the left, Martin on the right of your screen, and right behind them, Fogli.
Yeah, Lara Fauli is very interesting because she's part of that top Italian contingent training with Orlando Pizzolato in Ferrara, Italy. They have an elite training center there. It's much like our Eugene, Oregon. And she is the one that is just off behind the two of them in the white with the blue shorts. Close to our camera, of course, is Elisa Martin, and she's running very convincingly. But Greta looks like she's just very, very calm and relaxed. You know, I have never seen Greta so serene as I've seen her this week before the New York City Marathon. They have just run their first mile in 5 minutes, 44 seconds, and that's uphill. That's up the toughest hill on the marathon course. And by my estimation and on an approximate pace course for this race, that puts them right on schedule for a course record.
And about a minute ago, you saw the Verrazano Narrows Bridge entrance sign flash behind their shoulders as they turned off of the bridge. They're now on 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, which is the longest single stretch of thoroughfare to be occupied by the runners during the race. And look, of course, there are no cars along the side of the route. The New York City Traffic Department does a remarkable job of marking the entire route so that no cars will be parked. If you have the misfortune of putting your car there on the night before the marathon, you will find it in a compound in the Bronx the next day, and you will pay a pretty penny to get it out. And there's a look at the men's leaders. Now, a few moments ago, Walt Adams, who was wearing number 57, a 26-year-old runner from Richmond, Virginia, had separated himself from the pack and was about 20 yards in front. But now Adams begins to drift just a little bit back toward the large pack of runners you see behind his shoulder. And when a runner does this these days, Marty, particularly in the early stages of a marathon, we are conditioned to believe that perhaps big sponsorship money has something to do with it.
Yes, either that or the race itself will sometimes pay one of the runners to go out and set a fast pace, and that has happened today. It's incredible that all of those runners are up there after passing through the 2-mile mark in 9:28, which projects out to about a 2:06 marathon. But there are so many people that are willing to go with the pace. Surprises me a little. I thought many of them were talking before the race of saying, let Di Castella go out and let's let Jama go out and run in the back of the pack, and when people are dying, pick them up and earn as much prize money as possible. A lot of men were conceding the win to one of those two men, but as of now, they're all staying right up on the pace as Di Castella checks back as far as 20th place. Number 34 is perhaps the Orlando Pizzolato of this year, a European who could pull a big upset, Gerhard Hartmann of Austria.
Well, right now, let's go out to Larry Rawson as he covers the men's leaders from short range. Larry?
Thank you, Jim. It's interesting what's going on out here. Of the 11 top finishers in the 1984 Olympic Marathon, 4 are no longer running the distance, and of the remaining 7, 4 are in this race today. Led by Roble Jama up there, who you've been identifying, and Rob Di Castella. Back in the pack, Jerry Kiernan from Ireland and Peter Fitzinger, who won our 1984 Olympic trials. The first mile, 5 minutes on the nose. The second mile, 4 minutes and 25 seconds, if you can imagine that. An amazing time. The third mile, they passed 3 miles in 14 minutes and 20 seconds. The very fast pace continues. The crowds lining the race course, as you can see here. The wind conditions still boosting them along as we head down 4th Avenue here.
Larry, how about the rain? Is that bothersome for the runners at this point, or is it just not raining at all?
I would say about a half an hour prior to race time.
Larry, what, in your estimation, if you can still hear me, would account for the rapid pace at this point?
I think Pizzolato set the standard early on, much to our surprise, when he went up his foot in real effort along.
All right, well, we appear to be having just a little bit of transmission difficulty, which is not all that surprising because Larry is quite a distance away in that sidecar as they run now through the Sunset Park section of Brooklyn, mile 4 on the 26-mile 5-borough course. They stay in Brooklyn for just about the first 13 miles, and we'll be with them there when we come back.
The 1986 New York City Marathon. This ABC Sports exclusive is being brought to you by Kemper Financial Services, a concern for your future. By General Electric. At GE, we bring good things to life. And by Mercedes-Benz, automotive sponsor of the New York City Marathon.
An aerial look at 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. The runners in the Sunset Park section of Brooklyn, now mostly Hispanic, and entering a section of Brooklyn where an important part of the Battle of Long Island took place in 1776, a battle which introduced to the rebel forces at that time a general named George Washington. Women's leaders after 3 miles, Vites, Martin, and Fogley, and they've reached the point now where, as you can see, the men's and women's fields are beginning to converge, so there will now be probably, Catherine, some men runners who will latch themselves on to these women leaders and hope to be pulled along to a good pace.
That's right. One of those men over there is going to be Jan or Arold, one of Greta's brothers, who are very, very supportive and with her here along with her husband, Jack. Jack, her husband, is not running, but they are in the race, and Jan or Arold will try to find her along this point just to give her some words of encouragement. It's important to note that there are no men allowed under about 3 hours or 3:30 on the women's side for 8 miles because they're trying to keep away very much from this issue of pacing so that the women have to run the race all by themselves. That's a crucial issue in international competition right now and a very controversial one.
You can see, incidentally, that Vites and Martin are both very fluid runners. Lisa a little bit more bent forward at the waist. Laura Fogley tends to sort of waddle along. She does not have a very fluid style. But, Catherine, I think we're able to make contact right now with Diana Nyad on the vehicle which is covering the women's leaders. Diana, do you hear me?
Yeah, Jim, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I certainly can.
Okay, listen, I've got 3 things for you. First of all, what you just said about Laura Fogley is exactly right, and it's partly because of the pace. She is struggling a little bit in the back, although she wants very much to keep in touch with both Lisa and Greta. My suspicion is if she can hang there even halfway through, it'll be good for her. Now take a look, if you can, at Lisa Martin. Her head is cocked slightly to the left, and I'm telling you that for the first 3.5 miles now, she has not once glanced, I mean not even a glance towards Greta. She's trying to keep the pressure off herself and keep cool. And another thing is that Greta, even though they are all running right side by side right now, Greta is the one who is set. She is the dominant one. When she moves an 1/8 of an inch to the right, the other two, like little mechanical soldiers, just drop right in with her. She's the one setting the pace. She's the one deciding which tack on the road they're going to take. And I tell you something, I've got the best seat in the house. It's a great race so far.
All right, thank you very much, Diana. A little bit earlier this week, we spoke to Lisa Martin about her most significant marathon victory so far, earlier this year at the Commonwealth Games.
The Commonwealth Games, it was one of the most unique marathons that I've ever run in because it was an all-women's field and there were only 12 women in that race. And I won it, I ran 2:26, and I ran it virtually alone. And I think the best thing from that marathon was that I learned that I can run without having to have men around to pace me if need be, that I can do it alone. After that race, I had 3 months up until New York, so I went back to Phoenix. It was too hot, so I left for Oregon. And I basically did the same sort of training that I'd been doing before Commonwealth Games. I didn't have time to try anything new, so I just kept up with my track workouts, with doing long runs, and I've had an injury-free, illness-free run into New York.
Couple of quick points. You saw the wooden sawhorse barriers, which still separate the men from the women. Technically, they do not really merge until the 8-mile mark, though now there is nothing more really than a psychological barrier between them. There's Gary Finelli, who has the Met uniform on, a fielder's glove in her left hand, a ball being tossed in the air. It's not a Norwegian sport, Catherine. What do you suppose Greta thinks of that?
Well, you know, Greta is obviously not paying too much attention to it, but it is sort of the ridiculous to the sublime. We have to realize that these women are running a 2:25:30 pace, which would be a course record here. And also the fact that, you know, Gary himself is running that fast, and he's playing around. It's really quite amazing that he can do that.
Well, Gary's no slouch as a marathoner. And Diana made an interesting point about Lisa Martin not looking at Greta Vites. I suspect it might be intimidating to watch her face, which is so serene during most parts of the race. There again, Marty Licori, the still rather large men's lead pack.
strangely, because by 4 miles now, which they've passed, many of these runners should have waken up to the fact that they're running way over their head, but no one is cutting back. There's a big group there. Walt Adams, one of the early leaders, Paul Ballinger of New Zealand, Bill Reifsnyder, number 54, who led the race last year for the first 10 miles. Gerhard Hartmann, number 34 from Australia, who is rumored to be ready to make a large breakthrough. He's run 2:12. Ibrahim Hussein, 28-year-old from Kenya, number 30, is right up there. Frank Shorter was up there for the first 3 miles, number 15. Gianni Poli, number 10 from Italy. He is the Italian record holder. Pizzolato is the third fastest Italian man. And then you've got Pizzolato and Di Castella right in there.
Can't find Frank Shorter in the pack. That's certainly a big surprise that Frank would have been in the lead pack at this point. It brings back a lot of memories, doesn't it?
I'm sure there were a lot of people surprised to see that and cheering him along the way. There he is. He's got a white shirt on the right, just over the shoulder of number 1, Pizzolato. Frank's there, white top with a little red stripe through it, and it must be deja vu for him.
Remember 1972 in Munich? Frank Shorter won the Olympic marathon.
Number 17 today, next to Gerhard Hartmann.
Yeah, that's Hartmann, who has fixed himself, it appears, for the moment on Pizzolato's left shoulder. And then right next to Frank Shorter is number 70, I believe. And we'll check quickly to see who that is. That looks like El Mustafa Nefidaki of Villapignano, Italy. Roble Jama of Djibouti, excuse me, is wearing bib number 3. And for the moment, we have not been able to locate Jama within the pack. So look for bib number 3. Would that be Jama moving up on the outside? No, now we're told that he is 150 yards behind the leaders. So perhaps Jama has sensed before the others that this pace is too fast. And back there with Jama, I'm now told, is Pat Peterson.
Well, two things could be inferred from them, and one is that Pat Peterson is the only native New Yorker in the front of the pack, and the Africans usually go to somebody in the race who they feel knows the course the best. So who would know the course better than Pat Peterson? So he is hanging on him. But you remember in the opening I said the Africans don't seem to be winners yet, and that's why. They try to run someone else's pace, use someone else's knowledge, and they come up second and third. They don't win. To win, you have to be bold, and right now there are about 13 people in the first pack who are bold, 11 of them who are fools.
Larry Rawson, you see anybody who's ready to crack and prove that he's a fool?
I don't, Jim, not yet. However, I'll add one interesting name. I don't think it's been brought up yet, who's up in the lead and should be at the far left hand as you look at it on your home set with the leaders, and that's the legendary Philbert Bailly, who made his reputation as a great miler and has been living in the United States and Oklahoma.
He's on the
he is
far
wearing
left.
a white top and red shorts, and I'm actually behind him at the moment. That's correct. There's Philbert Bailly from Tanzania, and silver medalist 1980 at the steeplechase distance, wearing number 87. Ibrahim Hussein. Everybody's comfortable. This is early in the race. The monitoring on the part of the athletes will begin shortly, where they'll listen for each other's breathing, watch for the arm action, kind of start to observe who's feeling good and who's not. The pace has been very strong. We've been averaging around 4 minutes and 53 seconds per mile. To get the second mile, they ran that in 4 minutes and 25 seconds downhill. The crowd is getting revved up here, and again, I think it's a fine scene coming through Brooklyn. I'm surprised at the number of people, Marty and Jim, up in the lead pack.
All right, thanks, Larry, and indeed a good call on the legendary Philbert Bailly, once the world record holder in the 1,500-meter run. Who can forget his duels with John Walker of New Zealand?
I saw him. I couldn't recognize him from the front. Like Larry, I only recognize him from behind.
That is the case with most middle-distance runners. Meanwhile, an aerial shot, again, of 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, the street on which the runners spend by far the longest time on any one thoroughfare during the course of the race. As we go back now to the women's leaders, you're going to be looking from the side, or check it. Those are the men's leaders. As we look now at the women's leaders, looking from the side at Greta Weitz, Laura Fogley, who's now moved just ahead of Lisa Martin, and third place.
This is an interesting race now, Jim, because you can see clearly that Greta is calm and totally in control. Lara Folli from Italy, the Italian national champion, in my estimation, is running way over her head in this race. She's 2 or 3 minutes under her best time already in terms of her course records. And also, she has a bad Achilles tendon. She's going to be having sort of a bursitis type of surgery after this race in Los Angeles. Lisa Martin on the right in the black and white, clearly working very hard. She's running a pace here that is her best time, so it's going to be a big effort for her, and she thought it would be.
And there are the men's leaders. For the moment, Pizzolato has put his bib back in front. That is Pizzolato #1. It's hard to make out the bib number beside him, but I think it might be, yes it is, number 30, Ibrahim Hussein, 28 years old from Kenya, who ran a personal best of 2:12:08 in Honolulu. And he had an interesting quote earlier this week. Peterson, before we get to that quote, Marty, which is not necessarily from him, but from Henry Rono, I should say. Peterson, it looks like such difficulty for him to make his way along. Number 14, the New Yorker, who has been 3rd and 4th in the past 2 years. And they're in a secondary pack back there. And there, for the first time, you can see number 3, Roblejama of Djibouti, who is the man with his bib in front of that pack.
Well, perhaps already we know that his 2:14 marathon in Paris was not indicative of a man who was training through the race, but perhaps he's not in the shape that he was in prior years. They're back past 130th place, so they're having a big problem right now.
And there again is a look at the 3 women's leaders. Unofficial time to this point as the clock runs, 33.5 minutes. Diana Nyad, your impressions at this moment?
Yeah, Jim, a couple of things. Lisa Martin has stopped twice now for water. As a matter of fact, the last time she stopped, she took a couple of steps back off Greta because she took great trouble getting the top off the bottle and make sure she drank quite extensively. The other thing is, this might be a nice time to get a shot of Lisa Martin's upper leg. The whole area, the long-distance runner, as a general rule, is very, very slim, not very developed buttocks. But Lisa Martin, that is the look of a hurdler, an ex-hurdler, and a sprinter. You can see the very heavy development there. And I guarantee you, if she comes down to just 400 yards to go in this race, she's going to have the sprinting body to get through that 400 yards. One last thing, the pack of men that you see on the other side of the road, which does include Greta Weitz's brother, they are constantly looking over at the women as if this is the most special thing in the world for them to be running this fast a pace with the best marathon runners in the world for the women.
All right, thank you very much, Diana. And there a shot from overhead of the 3 women who have separated themselves rather dramatically at this early point from the rest of the women in the race. There again, the pack of men's leaders with now Hussein holding himself in front. And there's a good look at Rob Di Castella. A little bit earlier, I asked Rob Di Castella, who is a great veteran and has thought this event out to the limit, what is the physical and mental effort necessary to run a great race?
What is required of you is twofold. One is to be conditioned, to be in great physical and mental condition. And this comes through one's training. You know, training is not only getting yourself physically fit, you know, going out there and running 120 miles a week. Sure, it gets your legs and your muscles and your heart and everything into good shape, but it's a mental discipline. You know, you're out there twice a day doing, you know, 3 or 4 high-quality sessions a week where you have to, you know, go out there and really, you know, hammer yourself. And that requires an enormous mental commitment. And that, you know, I think develops this mental strength that you therefore use, or you're therefore in a position to use in a race situation. But you can't use it if you're a little bit tired or jaded. And, you know, you have to be sort of like a newly cut diamond. You just have to be crystal clear and sparkling. And if you are a little bit jaded and tired, you lose that little bit of sparkle and zap that you really need to get that inspired performance out.
Marty, let's talk about Di Castella for a second. He was favored to win the 1984 Olympic Marathon in Los Angeles, had occupied the role of favorite for more than a year going into that race. Startlingly to most, he did not get a medal in the Olympics. Followed that with 3rd places at Chicago in each of the past 2 years. This year, he appears to be back in form as the #1 marathon runner in the world. Do you think it took him that long to regain lost confidence after the Olympics?
certainly his confidence is down, but Deke is the kind of guy that goes out every day and has been for 15 years, puts in hard work all the time, and he never gets injured. He never gets excited. So it's kind of just a matter of time before he gets back to the top. In the Olympics, anything can happen. It was a hot day. He had a bad race. But as I said earlier, over the past 10 years, he has been one of the top 3 at all times in the world, and right now is the top runner in the world. If I were him, I would be wondering what's happening out there today. Strangely enough, there's a whole group of African runners. Filbert Bayi on the left there, just looking around. Ibrahim Hussein, Alfredo Shahanga, African athletes who are moving up to the marathon. Former world record holders in the mile like Bayi, and he knows that they're not in this seriously. They won't be able to last till the end, but they're messing up with the pace of the race. It's been very fast and uneven. They're slowing down a little bit now to about 2:08 marathon pace.
And at the 8-mile mark, they are in the Fort Greene section of Brooklyn, a mixed ethnic neighborhood. It's one of the many neighborhoods that make up the patchwork of New York's largest borough, and that close-up shows you exactly where they are, right next to the Williamsburg Bank Tower, which is a major landmark for the runners. In fact, they stare at it if they look up for just about these first 8 miles of the race. So that is one psychological turning point. They now go past the Williamsburg Tower. It is no longer the center of their vista as they look forward, and they begin to look forward to the next horizon, which is indeed the next big sight mark on the course, about 5 miles or 6 miles away, the 59th Street Bridge, entering Manhattan. There is Greta Weitz, Laura Fogley just behind her, and Lisa Martin on Fogley's right shoulder, as the two of them have more or less switched positions in the last few miles, Catherine.
And that's right, Jim. They have just passed mile 6 in 33 minutes, 28 seconds, which is still a 2:26 marathon pace. Now, of course, that's a pretty good time for Greta, but it is superior, way over her head time for Laura Fawley, and she's looking very good, and it would be a best also for Lisa Martin. I'm really surprised to see Laura up here, not only because of her injury, but she seems to be picking up. She's looking smoother and better, and she is now off Greta's shoulder. Reached in easily for her water there, but Lisa keeps sort of dropping back a little bit. Again, Lisa has a superior speed, but she knows that she's going to have to make her move to stay with Greta most of the race if she's going to be able to utilize that speed at all.
I get the feeling we're going to be looking at those three for quite some time. And that becomes a little bit of a war of nerves. And now, once again, as you look at Orlando Pizzolato, let's go back out to Larry Rawson.
Thank you, Jim. Major changes going on here as Orlando Pizzolato and Ibrahim Hussein lead this human convoy of 18 people up in the lead group. The major changes, the weather looks like it could have a major shift right now. Overhead and off to my left, and in the direction we're running, we actually have clear blue skies with very high humidities. The temperatures could be up right now, I'd say, at about 62 degrees. If the sun stays out, we may be up at 70 degrees. The pace has been right now at about 4 minutes and 55 seconds per mile. They're running it very consistently. There is a bit of a tailwind, however, not that severe a tailwind, so that they're going to notice it a great deal. The shirts on these athletes are matted. I've also noticed one other interesting thing. De Castella on his left hand has all of his times and splits written down, and I watched him refer to them during the opening miles. We're at about 8 1/4 miles. The crowd continues to build as we head towards downtown Manhattan.
And there goes Deke right now as he moves up to position himself on Pizzolato's shoulder and perhaps go by. Indeed, De Castella has chosen to go by Pizzolato and take the lead. And there's an interesting contrast in style. You can see that Rob De Castella, by far the most physically robust and strong of big-time, big-money marathon runners, pounds the surface of the road in a way that few other runners could get away with, Marty.
Well, a coach seeing him as a young man would say, you'll never be a great marathon runner. You don't fit the mold. But he's been durable and held up through it. And I think here he's decided now to take control of the race. This large crowd is getting to be a little bit bothersome for him. You can't run your own route, and he's decided to take it out now. This is sort of what he did in Boston. He moved even a little earlier in Boston, but the psychological battles are going on very early in the race. neither of these two favorites will let the other guy get any bit of a psychological edge. Every move has been answered, which may not be a wise thing to do this early in the race. Hussein, number 30 there, watching it going on and just playing cool. Hussein's run 2:12, but he could improve enough to win this race.
And you saw another spurt as Pizzolato put himself back in front of Di Castella. Earlier, we asked Orlando Pizzolato, whose two previous victories were surprises here, about his attitude coming into this third race. And this is what Orlando Pizzolato said about his 1986 attitude toward a race he's already won twice before.
I hope, you know, there are 20,000, not 20,000 people that won the race, but there is a lot of people, good runner, they want to run in New York City, and I think everyone wants to eat the Big Apple.
Everyone wants to eat the Big Apple, and certainly Orlando has developed a taste for it.
Well, he's been staying at the Plaza Hotel for the last month, which leads me to think back to a few years ago when the winner of this race didn't win as much money as he paid for one night's lodging.
And we used to think it was an ascetic lifestyle, right? A month at the Plaza Hotel is a prize in itself, as you know if you've ever been there. And we'll be back right after this.
Coming out.
We're grateful that Larry Rawson and Diana Nyad are able to provide their impressions to us from close range, because we have to make a few guesses here as we watch video of the race from quite a distance of several miles away from the runners. But Marty LaCour, your general impression of what's going on with the men so far?
Well, I'm very surprised that Pizzolato's come out and taken the lead like this. He has run the fastest second half of a marathon of any man alive. He did that in Japan. Him coming out and taking the lead is about as surprising as Joe Frazier coming out and starting to bob and weave in the first round. So I don't know if changing his strategy is going to be a mistake or not.
And our medical expert here on the set pointed out during commercial, Dr. Paul Thompson, that in this intense humidity, sweat evaporation is a problem for the runners. They don't cool off in quite the same way.
Well, they've got a slight tailwind at their back and about 90% humidity. As Larry said, their shirts are matted. They're not able to get any breeze over their bodies. So it's a deceiving type of hot day. It's only about 62. The sun isn't hot, but they're not able to get the sweat blown off them. So in the latter stages of races, some of the people in the back of the pack may have been proven to make a good decision. You gamble in this race. As Larry said, if they get into Manhattan and the sun is out, some of the people in the back of the pack may have the last laugh.
Indeed, they're guessing just as we are, but Catherine Switzer, the three women's leaders have the advantage of knowing that they are in a relatively small competitive environment, facing probably only each other and looking at each other all the way.
Yes, that's right, but it's become really quite a head game, because they all said that times are not important to them. Winning is important to them. And Greta is clearly in control of the race, but Laura Foley from Italy is running the race of her life, and Lisa Martin, of course, is also near a personal best time.
All right, there once again a look at the men's leaders. The men and women, incidentally, have now, as I said earlier, technically merged on the course. So from now on, when you see Greta Weitz and Lisa Martin and Laura Foley, you will see men running around near them, next to them, sometimes elbow to elbow. Once again, that is Ibrahim Hussein, number 30, who is in the lead. Number 1, Orlando Pizzolato, right behind him. And who is that third runner, Marty?
That is the Italian teammate, which you so graciously, at first sight, pronounced his name the first time.
And shall I give it another try? As soon as I find it here, yes, that's El Mustafa Nekkadi. El Mustafa Nekkadi. And my apologies to native Italians who know better than I how to pronounce that last name.
But our praise to him for running so far over his head. Hussein is a threat. He's a serious threat in this race, and he can't be taken lightly. Di Castella has dropped off the pace now and is watching what's happening at the front, because there are a lot of little psychological moves being made, surges, and you have to respect whatever he's decided to do. He's canny, and he knows how to run the race. He's dropping off the pace, and he's going to watch it for a while. But they're still running close to 2:07 pace. They ran the fastest mile, a 4:48 in that last mile, which was the fastest since the downhill second mile. So it's heating up. Pizzolato tried to break away. He couldn't do it, but it may be having the effect of softening up the pack as Hussein goes to the right to get a drink.
Rob Di Castella has not strayed too far away. He is in 4th place and is keeping close contact with the leaders, and now here comes Di Castella again. running a little bit like an African runner today with spurts thrown in from time to time. Larry Rawson, your impressions from out there?
Jim, it's really interesting. If you notice how the last time I spoke with you, there was a pack of 18 together. Shortly thereafter, it gets strung out an Indian file, and that's because Orlando Pizzolato threw in a 4:48 mile, as Marty was saying, picked up the pace. And really, Deke let him go. Deke Costello let him go, and as the pace slowed down again, while they lost most of the back of the convoy I referred to, it is now Di Castella and Pizzolato up front with Hussein, and Gianni Poli from Italy, number 10, has slid now into 4th place. Agapius Masson, who is studying down in Texas, is running in 6th place, and Bill Reefsnyder, an American hopeful who really could have a breakthrough here, is back now watching the rest of them from about 50 yards astern. The pace still very strong, and as Marty, I think, so appropriately said, I'm concerned about the second half of this race. I don't think it's over with yet. I'm surprised at how animated watching Pizzolato he is. He's waving to the crowd. When people sing out his name, he responds.
Larry, if you can still hear me, have you gotten a look at Roble Jama, and do you have an idea of why he is where he is?
No, I haven't, and I can tell you that he is back. I'm telling you, I don't...
Okay, I think I heard you say that you could not see Roble Jama at this point. Is that correct? Okay, we have a temporary transmission problem from Larry Rawson, and we'll try to pick up the story of Roble Jama a little bit later on. My guess, Marty, is that he is one of the runners in that pack just about, 40, 50 yards to the rear of these lead runners.
The lead runners, which it's very strange, there are 3 out of the 5 are Italian runners. Whether they have talked over some team tactics, maybe in the mid part of the race, one of the other Italian runners will start working with Pizzolato, I don't know. But the Italians have had a renaissance in distance running over the last 12 months. They were the first 3 finishers in the European Championships, and then recently an Italian doctor who had worked with the team for many years confessed that they had been using blood doping for the past 10 years and was not going to take part in it anymore. Now, Pizzolato and his friends laugh and say, no, we don't do any of that. We go to high altitude to change the consistency of our blood. But there have been serious accusations against many of the Italian runners over the past 10 years. And they're not the only nation that has done it. The Finnish and Swedish people have been doing this, and it certainly helps your performances.
For the uninitiated, the technique of blood doping refers to one in which a portion of the body's blood is taken out and stored. The blood then restores its own natural red corpuscle count over a period of time. Supposedly at a time shortly before competition, the blood which had been removed is then restored to the bloodstream, and therefore the red corpuscle count and theoretically the body's aerobic capacity is greatly increased. It was a subject first discussed about the time that Lasse Viren of Finland became a major force in distance running at the Munich Olympics in 1972 and earlier. I asked Orlando Pizzolato point blank, based on all of the suspicions surrounding the Italians, if he's a blood doper.
No, never.
So you don't know how it would make you feel?
Sorry?
You don't know how it would make you feel?
No, I don't know. I think it should be like when a runner train in the mountains, in the altitude. It should be like that, and that I experienced that because every time before a good race, I went to mountains for high altitude training, and when I go to see the sea level, I run well. That I think it should be a great helping, but you know you have to use only for legal opportunity, not for beat other people. Blood doping is not legal.
It is not legal in your view?
No, it's not in my legal in my point of view. In Europe, I read on the magazine, but I don't. I'm sure in Italy the other runners don't use blood doping.
Blood doping is a subject which has never completely gone away since 1972, and in light of what has recently been written about the Italians, it is not likely to go away soon. American bicycle racers in the past have admitted doing it.
The 1986 New York City Marathon. This ABC Sports exclusive is being brought to you by Mercedes-Benz, automotive sponsor of the New York City Marathon. By Wheat Thins, something like a cracker, but more like a snack. And by Bud Light, everything else is just a light. ABC Sports' exclusive coverage of the New York City Marathon continues.
And we hope you're having a pleasant morning as presumably you eat a healthy breakfast of granola, yogurt, and fresh fruit and watch the New York City Marathon with us. The runners are in the 12th mile of the race, just minutes away from the halfway point. I'm referring, of course, to the men's leaders in that statement. There are many more who are far behind them, and the women's leaders at this moment are joining among the men now. As mentioned earlier, the runners have merged, and you can see Greta Weitz there in the center of the screen. We're going to try to bring in Diana Nyad very quickly here. And Diana, your impressions out there.
Sidestep someone's sneaker or cups on the road. Jim, the women are running in a very, very tight pack here. Literally every couple of yards they have to sidestep someone's sneaker or a cup on the road, something like that. We're coming up just a couple of hundred yards to the 11-mile mark. If you remember last year, that's where Lisa Martin lost the pace, and I'm sure she's thinking this year that she's got to get over this little hump. Lisa's right about 5 yards in the black and white behind Greta. Laura Fogley is snuggled right behind Greta's left shoulder in the white top and the blue shorts. The three of them are still together. There is maybe a 5-yard separation now between Greta and Lisa. I should tell you that a couple of times Lisa has looked up toward the skies to see just how sunny it's going to get. And by the way, the clouds have dispersed almost entirely. And I'm sure after training in Phoenix in the 85-degree weather for the last month that she is hoping and praying that it will turn quite hot and that will turn toward her advantage. Lisa Martin in the black and white with the silver earrings, number 2. And ahead of her in the white shirt and the blue nylon shorts, that would be Laura Fogley. And as Catherine has said several times, and she's right on the money, Laura is having the race of her life. And ahead of her, of course, in the white top and the gray shorts, that's the great Norwegian, Greta Weitz, in control and in command, setting the pace in the women's race.
Thank you very much, Diana. It's worth pointing out, Catherine, that some of these men will not be near the women's leaders when the race ends. It must be, for several of them, a little bit of a thrill right now to run shoulder to shoulder with one of the 3 greatest woman runners in the history of marathon running. A girl who took up distance running as a little girl when her parents wanted her to study piano, and she rebelled against it.
Yes, she did, and that was 16 years ago, and she's been a top internationalist ever since. You know, she says, I've been a veteran since I've been 23, and that was 10 years ago. A little bit dicey, as you said, Jim, here, because they have to thread their way through these men, and as you can see, by and large, they're going past most of them slowly a little bit, and Laura right off of her, and Lisa behind her. It is very important for them to stay in touch with each other now until they can sort of break away and form their own pack. So strategically, I think this point in the race is very important in terms of sorting out. Greta said an interesting thing about running with these men, though, that was kind of cute. She said, I don't mind them running with me, and I don't mind them running close to me, as long as they don't keep trying to introduce themselves to me.
Well, there is a marked difference in style, as Diana pointed out. Lisa Martin wears earrings and makeup during the race. We don't know how expensive the earrings are, but virtually everything that a runner uses during the course of a marathon has a cost. And a little while ago, Marty LaCourie went to a running store to give us an idea of just how much.
Running originally got the reputation for being an inexpensive sport from the ancient Greeks, who ran without the use of shoes and without the use of clothing. But most of us would be a bit embarrassed to jog around our block without any clothes on. In fact, most of us start out with an outfit like this, an old pair of tennis shoes, our high school gym shorts, and a white t-shirt. Total cost on this outfit, about 20 bucks. But if you're so inclined, you can spend a little bit more money. For instance, a good pair of running shoes could cost you about 25 bucks. But you can get a great pair for $100. And of course, you'll want some $12 running socks to go with your $30 singlet and shorts. I'll have to admit I was pleased when the acrylic warm-up suit replaced the old cotton gray sweatsuits in the 1970s, but I don't know if I'm quite ready for the latest in cool weather running apparel. Lycra running tights. I think I'll just have to stick to the old Gore-Tex running suit by Alberto Salazar for $250. Of course, financing on this model is usually available. You don't see many runners jogging with stopwatches in their hands these days. Fortunately, the runner's wristwatch was invented, and today these babies give you everything, from your pulse to your temperature, and most of them even tell the time. Of course, the Walkman was a great boom. On this, you can listen to your motivational tapes of Michael Jackson or Bill Rogers. But there are plenty of other accessories to spend your money on. For instance, if you want to build up your upper body, you can carry weights in your hands with the running stick or the running gloves or your heavy hands. And of course, you want to know how far you ran, and you want to get there safely at night, so you need a reflective vest, maybe a reflective sweatband. And if it's raining, you need a deerstalker hat to keep the water out of your ears. Of course, $18 mittens are a big help. And here's one final item you won't want to be without. Even if you can't move to Boulder, Colorado and train at 7,000 feet, for $210, you can get this high-altitude simulator and train like you're in the mountains every day. So you see, in just 15 minutes and $1,077.98, I made the simple transition from the jogger of the 70s to the high-tech runner of the 80s.
Marty, I assume you put that on Mrs. LaCorey's credit card, but you look terrific. And there's a look at Greta as she still leads Laura Fogley and Lisa Martin. Of course, all things can be simplified with one brief reference to the running watches. I know of one man out there today, 55 years old, a jeweler of all occupations, who's never worn a watch and who times himself in his workouts by counting every step. He came into this race today planning for 26 miles, 385 yards to count every step. And there is a look at the Pulaski River Bridge, which crosses the runners from Brooklyn into Queens. So now they set foot in the third of the 5 boroughs which they will visit today on their tour of New York. An aerial shot of the 4 leaders. At the moment, those are Ibrahim Hussein, Rob Di Castella running right on his shoulder, Orlando Pizzolato and Johnny Poli, the 2 Italians trailing them. And Marty LaCory, they are still maintaining an exceptionally fast pace, particularly under these conditions.
Well, it's a tactical race now, really. I don't think they're thinking about how fast the time is, or Di Castella is looking at the splits on his arm anymore. There are a lot of men still in a position to win the race at 12 miles, so now you have to start thinking strategy. You have to think about a guy like Hussein and what will burn him off, and what can I do to burn off Pizzolato or Di Castella. So it's been a strategic race so far, but it's going to get more intense right now, and maybe Larry Rawlson has seen some of the rubbernecking that they're doing back in that pack.
Larry's in Queens as well. Take it over, Larry.
Thank you, Jim. We have just passed the halfway point. The time, 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 7 seconds. Double it, you got a 2:08 marathon pace. It's still pretty humid out here. In the last 3 New York marathons, the leaders who were up there at the halfway checkpoint were not the winners of the race. I've noticed here, I think Pizzolato's struggling just a little bit. Deke put on a surge on the bridge, opened up 10 or 12 yards, and there was a look of exasperation on Pizzolato's face. It's early, in my opinion, for that to occur, but right now you see a body of 4 here as we begin to head through Long Island City. Deke told me before the race that he was going to take fluids at 4 different locations, and they would be a composition of glucose, sugar that is, really, mixed with water. Hussein looking very comfortable out here. I think his story is going to unfold in the last 5 miles. He is not a seasoned marathoner, but a great half marathoner. To go over all of the leaders with you, in the lead, Rob Di Castella, the fastest marathoner in the world this year. Ibrahim Hussein, twice the winner of the Beta Breakers in San Francisco, off his shoulder. Behind him, Gianni Poli from Italy, and Orlando Pizzolato in blue, bringing up the 4th. Notice Pizzolato again is the 4th of the 4. It's frequently a sign of weakness as they begin to string out Indian file through Long Island City. The break between Pizzolato and 5th place is now about 300 yards. So from this group, I think you're going to see the lead continue right up through into Central Park.
All right, thanks very much, Larry. Marty, they are in Long Island City, and they don't spend a great deal of time in Queens. From here, the drama heightens as very shortly they'll cross the 59th Street Bridge into Manhattan. But do you sense that there is a crisis apparent for Pizzolato at this moment?
I think he's played all of his cards. He's run a different race than he ever has. And as Larry observed, maybe Pizzolato either consciously or subconsciously knew that he wasn't prepared for the race. And you know what an athlete does when they're a heavy favorite and they know they're not prepared? They change their strategy and they do what they think will save face so that people can say, he didn't win, but he ran tough the first half of the race this year, so he gave it his best shot. Maybe he knew at mile 24 and 25 he was going to come up short, and he did what was the face-saving thing, and that was to force the pace. But now he's in a position that I don't think he's ever been in before, where he was leading, then dropped off the pace, and has to come back. He was always in the back with no psychological pressure and slowly moved up. So he's changed his strategy, and right now he's saying, oh, what did I do? Come on back, guys. Give me a break.
And there's a look at the map which demonstrates precisely where they are as they approach the 14-mile mark in the Long Island City section of Queens. Interestingly, for years, a lot of real estate speculators in this city have thought that Long Island City was going to emerge as the next hot residential section, along with places downtown in Manhattan like Soho and Tribeca. Hasn't happened yet, and some people tell me that simply isn't ever going to happen. It has remained an industrial section of the city. There was a look at the 59th Street Bridge, which is upcoming and which is the place where the runners will cross into Manhattan. And if you've ever watched the show before and been in the race, as so many of you have, then you'll recall the feeling of coming on to First Avenue, where the largest crowds by far greet the runners. The bulk of what observers here claim is a 2.5 million person crowd which witnesses the event live every year. Now, there's a graphic look at the three leaders, and you can see how far back Pizzolato has fallen. He has indeed lost contact. Larry, give me an estimate on exactly how far back Pizzolato has fallen in just the last 3/4 of a mile or so as we've been watching.
Jim, he is probably 30 yards off the pace right now. He is choosing to run over the far corner of the road away from the other runners. There is not a headwind right now, but you're right. You don't want to lose contact. One point I'll make here, you get out in no man's land away from the leaders and you fall back usually very quickly. Jim?
Live from New York City, ABC Sports' exclusive coverage of the New York City Marathon continues. Here now is Jim Lampley.
Well, the men's leaders, as you can see, are approaching and indeed, I believe, entering right now the 59th Street Bridge, the one made famous in a song by Simon and Garfunkel, also called here in New York the Queensboro Bridge, because it takes the runners from Queens into Manhattan. Now, earlier in the day, we introduced to you 4 runners who run in the back of the pack, a little bit behind the leaders, and who are representative to a certain degree of the kind of people who make up this huge field. One of them, 28-year-old Jeff Lucas, a fireman from Wilson, North Carolina, last visited New York when he was 3 years old, is standing by now with Lynn Swan. Swanee, take it away.
Jim, thank you. Jeff, how you feel during the race?
All right, fine.
Anything happening different in the back of this pack we should know about?
The only thing I know is they're crowded. It's crowded. It's nice, though. New York's all right.
How does it feel to run in the race with 20,000 people when you come from a town that only has 15,000 living there?
The town I live in is at 200.
Has 200?
Yes, sir. See, North Carolina. It's something to see. If you ain't never seen it, everybody ought to come see it one time.
Well, you don't look too tired out from this race at the 9-mile mark.
I feel fine right now. It's just getting hot.
How long do you think it'll take you to finish?
I'm hoping for under 4 hours. Whatever goes, I'll just do what I can do.
Well, Jeff, enjoy yourself.
All right, thank you.
Jim?
He'll be all right, Lynn. Gets pretty hot in the tobacco fields around Wilson, too. I can assure you of that. Jeff Lucas, 28 years old, sometime later today, expected to finish his first New York City Marathon. And there, an aerial shot of the majestic bridge, which is taking the lead runners from Queens into Manhattan.
And it's also gotten hot at the lead of the pack. Rob DiCostello has run a 4:47 mile. For the 13th mile, he's tightened the screws and pulled away from Pizzolato. Rob has a lot of respect for the last 10 miles of the course, particularly the last 3 in Central Park, where it gets hilly. And I think he's tried to make a move over the bridge here where it's slightly uphill, break away. Then he'll get on First Avenue. He'll float for a while in terms of his effort and get a lot of encouragement from the crowd and then buckle down again in the park. So he's tactically run a very smart race so far.
Now, Marty, he is one of the most experienced of all marathoners, but it is the first time he has run New York. Are there idiosyncrasies on this course which he may not have been able to account for, not having run the race before?
Well, I think this is why he's respected the course and has saved his effort for the second half of the race. The thing about De Castella is he never runs two races alike. You can't really typecast him. In Boston, he went out right from the start and led the race. This time, he played the games for the first 13 miles, but he's got to be thinking about Gianni Poli, the Italian behind him, because the Italians right now may or may not be doing some strange things in their running. It may be as simple a fact as the fact that Alberto Cova and Orlando Pizzolato have served as examples to the Italian runners, and their entire level of running has gone up. But it may be also the fact that, contrary to what Orlando said, some Italians have admitted to blood doping.
And you refer, of course, to our previous discussion about blood doping. But, of course, it should be pointed out, as Catherine Switzer mentioned to me during a commercial before, there is no testing procedure which will accurately tell you whether or not a runner dopes blood.
That's right, Jim. There's no test available, although some Swedish doctors supposedly are working on it right now. The IAAF, however, the international governing body of track and field in the United States, at their Stuttgart meeting in the European Championships, have made a rule, though, and they have said, quote, the practice of blood doping is forbidden. So they know it's a worldwide problem.
What about Lara Fogli there, who's running faster than we might have expected her
Well,
to?
let me tell you what is happening here is a tremendous surprise. Lisa Martin, who we thought was the person to give Greta Weitz the run for her money today, is out. I mean, she's 70 seconds back. She's not in our picture. She's off the pace. But Lara Fogli from Italy, running the race of her life in the white, right off Greta's shoulder, right behind her, making Greta do all the work, but Lara, the race of her life.
Diana Nyad, your impressions of Weitz, Fogli, and Martin at this point?
Yeah, Jim, Catherine, I'll tell you what happened. Coming up the Pulaski Bridge toward the halfway point, up that hill there, for some reason, they didn't pick up the pace, Greta and Laura, but for some reason, Lisa Martin just dropped way back. She lost 25 yards, I'd say, within 30 seconds. She almost stopped running, and now she's a good 50, I'd say, as close to 75 yards back. Lara Fogli is being extremely aggressive. When a man comes in her way, she puts her hand on his hip, and she throws him out of the way. She wants to stay right on Greta Weitz's shoulder. Also, when they both go around corners, the last couple corners they went around, both of them actually physically turned around to see where Lisa Martin was. So, at least for the moment, it's turned into a two-woman race, not a three-woman race, with Greta and Lara Fogli together.
Diana, talk to me about their facial expressions. Greta Weitz, to me, is nothing if not inscrutable.
Greta is what, Jimmy?
She's inscrutable. I often can't tell what's happening in her body by the look of her face.
Yeah, well, I was going to say when Larry Rawson was talking earlier about Pizzolato reacting to the crowd, I guarantee you, these lead women will have no idea what anyone on this course looked like, what any building looked like on the course. It'll be strictly an audio impression for them because they look ahead, they look at the road ahead, they never look at anything else. And I think that's a matter of keeping your composure. When you've got 2 or 3 or 4 miles to go, then you can let the adrenaline flow, take a look around at the people, feel the crowd, and let it do something for you. That's Greta in the blue top, the blonde, obviously, right on her shoulder, in the right top, in the white top, number 3, Lara Fogli. And you know, in the first 2 or 3 miles of this race, she was struggling. Her stride was much too long, and now she's shortened up her stride a little bit and increased her cadence. And I take back what I said before. It looks to me like she's running quite comfortably at the fastest pace by far she's ever done for a marathon. I was going to tell you one other thing. I talked to a policeman a couple of miles back. He told me that during the New York Mets parade, the crowd was so unruly and crazy, they jumped on his car and completely crashed in the roof. So even though we do have a colorful kind of vocal crowd today, they're quite reserved and respectful of the runners. They make sure to get out of the way when they run by. Pretty good for New York City.
And they're not going to tear up the field after the game is over. Catherine, your response to what Diana said, quickly.
Yes, this is amazing because Laura has run 6 New York City marathons, and every year it's 4th or better. But let's see what happens at the halfway point.
All right, there is a water station at mile number 9, and that gives you a much better impression than my words ever can as to what the feeling is like and what the scene is like in the great mass of runners who are far behind the leaders on whom our coverage concentrates most of the time. Lynn Swan is now standing by, I believe, with Craig Mortensen, the electrical engineer from Washington. No, it's Pipasa, the girl from San Francisco. Lynn, how's Pipasa doing?
Well, she tells me she's doing fine. Jim Lampley wants to know how you're feeling before the race.
Very good. I was meditating before the race so that I could get into soulful consciousness.
It seems more like there's a party going on out there.
It is. It's a big celebration. It's like humanity's transcendence race.
Now, you are a vegetarian. You don't eat any meat, but you feel fine. No problems running this race?
I feel very strong. I draw on my inner strength through meditation. I draw on my inner strength, and I bring that forward. I got an inner confidence.
What was your thinking back at the start with the crowds of people?
A lot of people.
Did you feel like you have any problem getting through all of them?
My first mile, I walked for 4.5 minutes. It was quite something. I've been in this race before, though. Last year I was prepared for it.
Okay, Pipasa, thank you very much. Lampley?
All right, thank you, Pipasa Glass and Lynn Swan. And now there's a dramatic development at the front of the men's race. As the runners are going up First Avenue in Manhattan, large numbers of people on both sides of the street, Johnny Poli of Italy has suddenly pulled away from Rob Di Castella. You see the gap right there, Marty LaCory. Poli looking over his shoulder to check Di Castella's presence, and this is still another of the spurts we've seen so many of already today.
Di Castella is kind of the post on which all things in the race revolve around. He has had to fight off various challenges, and this is another one. Johnny Poli's 25-year-old Italian. He's run 2:09:57 for the marathon. Last year, he was 4th in Chicago with that effort. He ran 2:15:25 in the European Championships in August. So, like Di Castella, his last marathon was only 3 months away.
Incidentally, you see the police vehicles which create part of the motorcade that guides the runners along the course at the front of the pack. There are 18 different police motorcycles along with all the police cars that function in that role, and they're used only 3 times all year in New York. One would be when the President of the United States visits, the other would be when the Pope visits, and the third would be the New York City Marathon. And Rob Di Castella has just moved back in front of Poli, Marty.
Well, this is a tough part in the race because it's flat, a lot of it's downhill, and you can run very fast in it. It's now almost like a track race, and Di Castella knows if this comes down to a track race, then Johnny Polo may have the advantage. Poli has set 3 Italian marathoning records, and he is the record holder of 2:09:57, so it's not totally surprisingly that he would come up with a better race than Orlando Pizzolato, who took most of the pre-race height. He hasn't really won a race yet, so here's where you give Di Castella the advantage. Di Castella has won 8 of 14 career marathons, and those are 8 major marathons. He is a veteran.
And keep in mind that Poli's fast time of 2:09:57 was run on the Chicago Marathon course, which is known as one of the very fastest in the sport. Di Castella's 2:07:51 earlier this year, about a minute and a half or 2 minutes faster than that, was run on the Boston course, which is regarded as one of the toughest. And there's a look back at how far they are from the rest of the men. Orlando Pizzolato, I believe, is the 3rd place runner, and he's way back behind them, as that aerial shot shows you. And it is not Pizzolato. Indeed, it is Hussein who's running in 3rd place. Pizzolato in 4th place. Now, you never count Pizzolato out entirely because of the experiences we've had in watching him, particularly last year. But on the other hand, while it may be a little early to go out on a limb, it's highly unlikely he can catch Rob Di Castella, isn't it, Marty?
Well, Pizzolato is seeming to be stabilizing. He had a bad stretch when Di Castella threw in a 4:48 mile over the bridge. He dropped off the pace. But if he can maintain this until they get into the park, then he might be able to come back. Now, I just saw Di Castella touch his side. I don't know if he may be getting a side stitch or not. Di Castella, though, taking a long, hard look because he's got Poli on his side, but Poli finished 15th in the European Championship. 13th. It'd be a tremendous upset for him to come up and win this race. DeCastella is still thinking about Hussein and Orlando Pizzolato.
And I can guarantee you that within the small world of marathon running, a pole victory would generate a lot more speculation about other issues as well. There is a particular psychology which goes with being number one, and a little earlier I talked to Rod DeCastella about it.
The challenge is always there to aspire to be number one. And then once you reach that level, the challenge is to stay there for as long as possible. And, you know, I'm not sure which is the most difficult. There are a lot of negative influences and effects that you have to overcome when you are number one that you don't seem to have on the way up there. But to a large extent, that makes it more satisfying and rewarding if you can maintain that number one ranking.
They are on First Avenue. The king of the hill, the man regarded as the number one marathoner in the world, Rob DeCastella, trailing a rank outsider from Italy named Johnny Poli. 18 miles down, 8 to go.
The 1986 New York City Marathon. This ABC Sports exclusive is being brought to you by Better Cheddar Snack Thins, another fine Nabisco product, and by Mercedes-Benz, automotive sponsor of the New York City Marathon.
You've already heard from two of the back of the packers we introduced you to at the beginning of the day, Pipasa Glass, the waitress from San Francisco, and Jeff Lucas, the fireman from Wilson, North Carolina. Right now, standing by with Lynn Swan is the 34-year-old Delta flight attendant from Boston, Sue Demos. Lynn?
Thank you, Jim. Sue, the race is going well. Have you seen anything interesting out in the course?
Yeah, a few costumes going by. I did see a monster going by, and Queen Elizabeth, and another Prince Charles character I saw.
You ran this marathon in '84. What's different for you this year?
The weather. The weather. It's that humid, probably more humid, and there was a bit of rain this morning. The heat's about the same, and I don't think I'm so well dressed for it in this heat, but it's a really good crowd. It's great to be back here.
Has it been difficult for you jostling through this huge crowd as you come to the 9-mile watering hole?
No, it's not so bad. It was really bad back around 5 miles, and it's starting to split up now. It's starting to get a little bit, making room for everyone. So it's not so bad.
Okay, you have all my respect in this marathon. Take care.
And thanks very much.
Jim?
All right, thanks very much, Lynn. And there's a close look at Greta Weitz, Catherine Switzer, on the 59th Street Bridge coming into Manhattan. She appears for the moment to have dropped Laura Fogler.
She did, Jim. She dropped her on the bridge, and she's picked up the pace just a little bit. Granted, they're running downhill, but Laura is not in sight in our cameras here. She's about 50 meters behind, and they are projecting about a 2:26:30 performance here now for Greta. She continues at this pace. Interestingly, Greta has just passed one of the top-ranked Masters runners in the world, Gunther Milke from West Germany. It's interesting to see that these women are running very, very good competitive men's times.
Greta Weitz is getting ready to enter, Catherine, her second home, the island of Manhattan here in New York. And Diana Nyad is trailing right along behind her on that bridge. Now, the bridge is mostly steel, so we might have a little difficulty with transmission, but let's see. Diana, can you hear me?
Sure can, Jim. I don't know if you can hear me. Are you all right?
Yep, you're going great.
Okay, listen, I'll tell you another thing. It's the uphills that are doing it for Greta today. She and Laura Fogley dropped Lisa Martin back on the hill going up the Pulaski Bridge, and now Greta made a decided move when she crossed the 15-mile mark going up the Queensboro Bridge. She poured on some steam and left Laura Fogley in the dust. I mean, she may be, Catherine, she's more than 50 meters behind. She's about 100 meters behind at this point.
And listen to the roar as she pulls around onto First Avenue.
Listen to the crowd coming into Manhattan. What a great scene. Greta has created a nice, comfortable situation for herself, added by the fact that now the weather crazy today. I was comfortable about 2 miles back, and now I'm starting to shiver again, which is bad for me, but great for the runners. Greta should not have any problem. I would say, as I said before, Laura Fogley is probably now a good 100 meters behind Greta.
150 yards is quite a deficit at this stage of the race, and Greta Weitz has put a sudden burst on, just as a little while ago Johnny Foley did in the men's race. Greta has a lot of friends, Catherine, as she makes her way up First Avenue.
She sure does. You know, one year I went out and watched the race, and after the first 6 minutes passed, people don't start saying, where's the first woman? They start saying in New York, where is Greta? There's an expression here that Greta is the second most famous woman in New York, next to the Statue of Liberty.
You saw her turn to her left and talk to someone there. I wonder if it might not have been her husband, Jack, who often positions himself there to talk to Greta as she runs. We'll be back. In the men's race of the New York City Marathon, an aerial view of First Avenue, Rob Di Castello, the leader, Johnny Foley of Italy chasing him as they now move into the upper Manhattan area on First Avenue on their way to their brief scheduled sojourn in the Bronx. But right now, we've got a treat for all of you, men and women alike, because one of the runners in the race is one of the best known and highest paid fashion models in the world. You may recognize her from Sports Illustrated swimsuit fame, as well as various other fashion shoots. And I'm sure a lot of you women would like to see Kim Alexis sweating and perhaps a little bit frazzled as she makes her way through her first New York City Marathon. But Lynn, she looks pretty good to me.
She doesn't look sweaty and she doesn't look frazzled at all. How are you feeling so far in the race, Kim?
Doing pretty good.
You just had a baby 7 months ago. How in the world can you come out here and run the marathon?
I don't know. I just made it a personal goal to get back out, and it got me in shape. So it's something good to strive for.
How much running did you put in? How early after you had your child?
I bicycled 10 days after, and I started running 3 weeks after. I ran 4 miles and have kept it up ever since. I do about 30, 40 miles a week.
What about the crowd? As you're passing by, people recognize you. Are they reacting to you?
Yeah, a couple of people say, there she is, there's Kim. So then I wave.
Do you think they expect to see you in the bathing suit running the marathon?
I certainly hope not.
Well, I know you're anxious to get back to the race because you have a goal, a time that you want to finish in, so good luck.
Thanks, Lynn.
Jimmy?
Thanks, Lynn. What a great understated graphic. Kim Alexis, occupation model. It's a little like saying Margaret Thatcher, occupation politician. There's Greta Weitz, occupation marathon champion, as she makes her way up First Avenue.
Right, she's on a 2:27 pace now, Jim, and she's got the race all sewed up, it looks like, at this point, and this is what we said she would do. To Laura Foley's credit, she stayed with her longer than any other competitor has in the history of this race.
And as you look at the men's leaders, let me briefly cover one story. Roble Jama of Djibouti, the man who received so much pre-race speculation, as the Djiboutians are accustomed to now in their journey through the marathon running world, dropped out of the race, according to our reports, between the 12th and the 13th miles. The pace, or perhaps some other individual condition of his today, too much for him, Marty.
Well, the race now is really focused on these two men. For the last 4 miles, it's been run a mile in 4:52, then rest and run one in about 5:05, which each of them taking their turn at the front. But interestingly, back of the pack, about 100 yards, 200 yards behind, Pizzolato has stabilized and actually made up about 10 seconds in the last 4 miles on them. So there's still hope for Pizzolato to make a charge, but Ibrahim Hussein is still in between Pizzolato and the front group in 3rd place. So there's still a real good race for first and a good one for all of the top 4 sports, because a lot of top 4 places. A lot will happen in the last 3 miles. Diana had a comment that was very important for us to know, that when she got into Manhattan, she felt it was chilly. And that is very good for Rob Di Castello, because the weather's been hot, it's been tough, and if it cools down just a little bit, they're just running about 20 seconds off of Alberto Salazar's course record pace, and if it cools down and they have this type of a rivalry over the last 6 miles, you might see that record broken, as we're looking at now Pizzolato.
This is the 3rd of the 4 bridges in the race. If you've ever commuted from New York City back and forth to Westchester County, you've probably been on the Willis Avenue Bridge, which is the vehicle by which Foley, who's now in the lead, and Di Castello are making the transition from Manhattan up into the South Bronx. They spend a very short period of time in the Mott Haven section of the South Bronx, loop back around, and then get on to another bridge called the Madison Avenue Bridge, and from there, they're really in the home stretch as they start to make their way down through Manhattan towards Central Park. Larry Rawson, Foley looks good.
Jim, this is amazing what's been going on for the last few miles. A quick recap. Poli threw in a 4-minute, 45-second mile, and it opened up a distance on he and Di Castella. The next mile slowed down to 5:04 as he recovered, and Di Castella caught him. The last mile went in 4:52. I'm telling you, he looks fresh. I've been amazed at how fresh Poli looks. I've never seen a marathon with two runners stare at each other as much as Poli really has been looking. And I think the break right now is going on.
All right, Larry, we've lost you for the moment. We'll try to get back to you later on. As you look at Poli out in front, and in light of our long previous discussions about the practice of blood doping, it is worth mentioning that drug testing is being implemented for the first time this year in the New York City Marathon. The top 3 finishers and 2 others among the leaders will be tested at the end of the race, and the results will be sent from Los Angeles. It's being administered by the U.S. Olympic Committee. Won't be available for a few days. The banned substances list is huge, but again, there is no test which would tell us whether any runner in the race had ever used the technique of blood doping. And right now, we want to talk to you about Fred LeBeau, longtime director of the race, president of the New York City Marathon, or New York City Road Runners Club, who is one of the most visible figures in all of road running. We asked Fred LeBeau before this race why drug testing was being implemented this year for the first time at the New York City Marathon.
Years ago, when all the runners received just a trophy for winning a race, the incentive wasn't there to drug test, unless to go into drugs. But our concern is that with this amount of money at stake, it's literally millions of dollars, because once you win the New York City Marathon, it's not only the money you receive for winning, it's the endorsement possibilities. Your contracts with your shoe companies and other marathons to participate in increases. That's why we feel it's important we drug test.
There's a moral obligation, in your opinion, to the fans and those people who back it.
We have a moral obligation to the runners who don't use drugs, to the fans, to the media, and to ourselves. And not to be cheated by someone who performs through synthetic stimulants.
Well, it certainly appears at this moment as though Johnny Poli will be one of those tested, because Larry Rawson, if you can hear me, he looks like he's made his move.
Hear you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Poli is moving smartly. He's up on the balls of his feet still. He's running very comfortably. We are now running, however, into a very substantial headwind. And I am noticing the gulf between Poli and Di Castella is about 100 yards back, and I'm telling you, the Deke is struggling back there a bit. Unless Poli folds, I'd be surprised if Di Castella could come back on him. Poli looks fresh. I'm amazed at how fresh he looks. The pace is right on 2:08, 2:09 for the total marathon time. He's run only 2 miles so far of the first 20 miles, slower than 5 minutes per mile. Every mile has been under 5 minutes per mile. He continues to look over his shoulder and check back into where Di Castella is. I've seen him look back about 5 times in the last half mile just to check him. The air is cool right now. At one point, half the sky was blue, yet the sun never really reflected down on these athletes. The thing they're going to struggle with here now is the hills that Marty mentioned in Central Park. I don't think the race is over yet, but also the wind that they're going to have to face naked, so to speak. They won't have any trees to help block that wind for the next 4 miles. So I think this is going to be a fascinating finish that we have coming up. Holy...
All right, thanks very much, Larry. As you look at Rob Di Castella, Marty, he is no stranger to winning big marathons, but he's no stranger to losing them either. What goes through his mind at this point?
I think he's got to be thinking back to 1983 in Canberra, where he was farther behind than this, and he managed to win the race. He has done it before, and he's got to be thinking about the positive instances in his life when he was able to come down. He has a lot at stake. There's not a big pack behind him. First place is the only thing that he's thinking about, because he can afford to give it everything and go after first place. If with 2 or 3 miles to go he really starts to collapse, he'll still be able to hang on to 2nd or 3rd place. But he really looks like he's laboring now on this slightest upgrade. And of course the question going into the race, even in his mind, was, is 3 major marathons within 9 months too much? And right now, if we were sitting next to him, as Larry is, and we asked him, you'd have to say it was. It's too late in the race, really, for him to have a bad patch and really come back. He's got to start thinking, perhaps, at the people behind him. Hussein, and also Pizzolato, who, when the going got really tough, backed off a bit and may have saved something for a late rush in the park.
If you've ever done any distance running at all, you know that when you begin to get tired, you can feel the muscles in your face involuntarily tighten up and begin to get strictures. If we were to look at Rob DiCostella's face from much earlier in the race, when he looked good, and compare it to what we saw there, I think he would have looked like he'd aged about 8 years.
Well, it's not only a physical thing now. He knows that this is big trouble to be this far behind. And he can see, as Larry said, Johnny Poli not only is opening up a lead, not only has run well all day, but he looks so marvelous that it's got to worry you. Just his looks will put you in the tank.
They are in the South Bronx, and very shortly they will turn back downtown and come back toward Manhattan. And right now, you can see the huge gap that Johnny Poli has suddenly opened up just within the last mile and a half over Rob DiCostella. That aerial shot of Poli as he turns onto 5th Avenue at 138th Street, back in Manhattan, ready to make the final approach towards Central Park, which is where this race is won or lost. Status quo in the men's race of the New York City Marathon. The leader, Johnny Poli of Italy, into Manhattan. With him, Larry Rawson. Larry?
Jim, this race is not over yet. It's a soap opera out here. It looks to me like DiCostella looks a little better out there. The stride is stronger. He has closed down the gap on Poli by about 15 yards in the last mile. Going into the win, they're running the miles now in 5:07 to 5:13. And I tell you, Deke still looks good, so don't go away from your television sets.
The cheeks are puffing, though, as DiCostella chases Johnny Poli. Meanwhile, Greta Weitz looks about the same as she did on 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, now with a commanding lead in the women's race. Diana Nyad?
Yeah, Jim, I'll tell you something about the crowds. When the lead woman goes by, as Greta's now coming up 1st Avenue at about 116th Street here, they all point. They throw flowers. They get all excited as if this is a symbolic passing here of the first woman of the race. I have completely lost visual contact with Laura Fogley. I can only assume that she is so far back that unless Greta has some enormous unforeseen problem, she is on her way to her 8th victory in the New York Marathon.
And each year she learns a little bit more about what victory in the New York City Marathon means. Greta Weitz, once a shy schoolgirl from Norway, now an industry in and of herself with a book, a videotape, various other commercial running involvements, Catherine.
And well-deserved with all that experience. We can learn a lot from her. We were talking earlier about facial expressions. Let's look at Greta's face here. It is totally serene. Jack Weitz, her husband, has been telling me that Greta keeps at peace because she doesn't worry about times. She worries only about winning, and she makes that decision at the moment of the race. Greta's been running here with some of the top masters runners in the world, most notably Dirk van Saten from the Netherlands, number 41. And behind Greta, now Diana can't see her, but Laura Foley from Italy is 35 seconds behind her, and 35 seconds behind Laura is Lisa Martin. Other outstanding women in the race we should quickly mention behind them are Françoise Villeton and Odette Lapierre from France and Canada, respectively. They're also running very, very good races. And we're projecting at this point about a 2:27 finish for Greta. She's picking up the pace a little bit and looking great.
And I mentioned the self-contained industry which Greta Weitz is involved in. I asked her a little bit earlier if it is easier now to handle the public relations responsibilities of her role.
To tell you the truth, I must admit that it doesn't come natural, and I do it because I know that it's something that I have to do, but I feel most comfortable when I'm with friends and family and not a public person.
And someday that will be precisely what you do.
That would be exactly what I want to do.
She has written in her book that sometimes her friends are surprised to learn that she cooks and sews and washes clothes just like most wives do in marriages such as hers and Jack's all around the world.
But also she's joined the Norwegian Olympic Committee and works in a health clinic in preventative medicine. So that's very outstanding for her, too.
And there is Johnny Poli, who still holds the lead in the men's race. And hard to tell from this perspective, Marty Liquori, what's happening to DiCostella, but how does Poli look to you?
He's about 12 seconds ahead of DiCostella, so it's about 78 yards. The race isn't over. One thing to point out is Rob DiCostella is an Australian. but he lives half of the year in Boulder, Colorado. He's been there for the last 6 months during our summer, so he's very good at hills. He has to be to run there. When they get into the park, the hills are going to be a factor.
The hills look gentle as you ride around Central Park in a cab. They are not so gentle if you run around the park drive, as so many runners do. In fact, there are probably literally thousands of runners in this race who practice for the race by running on those hills in Central Park. Rob DiCostello, on the other hand, has only seen this course briefly. He ran the last 10 miles of the course about 4 or 5 days ago to get a feel for it, so he is not a total stranger to the hills of Central Park. You can barely see DiCostello behind the police car. There he is, in the middle of your screen, just to the left center. Rob DiCostello pounding along in second place. Favored to win here today. Favored to win the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. He lost there. He may be surprised to find himself behind Johnny Poli at this stage of this race.
Johnny Poli just ran a 5:13 miles, so he's slowing down, but DiCostello didn't make up any on that because he was 2 seconds slower per mile, so it's going to be a race of attrition, much as the last two New York City, well, the last three with Rod Dixon. It's not who can run the fastest at the end, it's who can slow up the least.
All right, Johnny Poli of Italy making his way toward Central Park. Rob DiCostello hoping to stay with him.
ABC Sports exclusive coverage of the New York City Marathon continues. Once again, Jim Lampley.
And there is an aerial look of the world's second largest urban public park, Central Park, about twice the size of the Principality of Monaco, which has been the major proving ground in the New York City Marathon ever since we at ABC Sports first began televising the race in 1981. Here is a major step forward for Johnny Poli as he has just moved into the park. A palpably different atmosphere now for the runners. No longer on city streets, but rather on the lovely tree-lined Park Drive. And you can see very graphically there, Poli passes under the 23-mile mark. He has 3 miles, 385 yards to go. Whether he is surprised by it or not, he still maintains a substantial lead over Rob DiCostello of Australia, regarded as the #1 marathoner in the world, regarded as the favorite to win this race. Quickly, Larry Rawson, a comment.
Jim, this race in no way is over with, although Poli still looks excellent. DiCostello is a strength runner. He hopes that he can gain on the hills here in Central Park. Also, looming behind DiCostello within striking range, should Poli run into trouble, is Ibrahim Hussein and the legendary Orlando Pizzolato. As he goes after and quest the Italian record holder Gianni Poli in the lead. The distance about 100 yards. It looks to me in the last half mile that DiCostello may have lost about 20 yards. This is an interesting finish. We have less now than 3 miles to go.
And if DiCostello can pull it off, he would not be the first runner to come from behind dramatically to win the New York City Marathon in Central Park. The race has been blessed with close finishes in recent years, most of them in this area.
In 1981, Central Park brought a Cuban boy by way of Oregon to the top of the marathon heat. Alberto Salazar broke a 12-year-old world best time in ideal conditions, then waited at the finish line to congratulate women's champion Allison Rowe, who duplicated Salazar's feat with a world best of her own. A year later, Salazar was pressed to the limit in the race's closest finish. He turned toward the 26-mile mark, shoulder to shoulder with Rodolfo Gomez, then sprinted away from the Mexican for his third and most difficult New York victory. It was, to this point, Salazar's last appearance here. Two new faces were at the center of the drama in 1983. Longtime New Zealander middle-distance star Rod Dixon had recently turned to the marathon, but through the park he was chasing lesser-known British runner Jeff Smith. Smith's agony was graphic, and so was Dixon's exultation at the finish. 1984 was a day of oppressive heat and humidity, and the race was a slow grind. Toughest in the park was the obscure Italian Orlando Pizzolato. First to finish, but thoroughly drained. Last year, Pizzolato started slowly, and for a while was nowhere in sight behind Djibouti's Ahmed Saleh. But on the park drive, the Italian fighter crept up behind Saleh and soon dropped him to the bitter consolation of second place. Orlando Pizzolato taught Ahmed Saleh the lesson of Salazar Gomez and Dixon Smith, that you run in 5 boroughs, but you win in Central Park.
Well, not much to say now. The drama is manifest. You have met Johnny Poli of Italy. Marty Liquori has told you his credentials. There's his last mile time, which is very slow. 23-mile split time, slowing down, projected winning time, rapidly getting slower. Di Castella not moving up the challenge on his shoulder.
Well, here's what happened. Poli ran a 5:13, but Di Castella ran 2 seconds slower. Then Poli ran a 5:18, but Di Castella ran 4 seconds slower. So Di is not coming back on Poli, but you know what? Pizzolato has moved into third.
Orlando Pizzolato perhaps providing some more of the kind of heroics for which he has become known, particularly last year, but also the year before. There are the standings of the top men. Hussein in 4th place. Nimchak now moving up into 5th place. Ralph Saltzman in 6th place. The leader by a comfortable margin now with less than 3 miles to go, Johnny Poli of Italy.
And we should point out that Pizzolato would love to win this race, but there's a particular feeling between he and Poli. Pizzolato is kind of the Rodney Dangerfield of marathon. He won here twice, but everyone says he can only run in the heat. He backed into the wind. Certainly in the first year, stopping 8 times, he backed into the wind. Last year, he was either a genius or a numbskull, but he managed to charge at the end of the race. But Poli holds the Italian record, and so Pizzolato feels that he doesn't get any respect in Italy because of Poli. So for Poli to win this is the worst thing that Orlando would like to see.
And there is the leader, Greta Weitz, in the women's race, who has not been challenged for quite some time now, Catherine Switzer. We're going to get a word from Diana Nyad in a moment, but Greta really pulled away on the 59th Street Bridge, and it's been no contest since then.
That's right. She keeps getting faster and faster. She's on a 2:26:30 pace. She has an expression, I want to go in a hurry slowly, so she's keeping moving out like this. Foley is still in the race, but 58 seconds behind, and Martin is still in the race. And it's interesting. People have criticized the New York City Marathon women's race for not being competitive. But what could be more competitive now than Greta Weitz, who goes out and annihilates the competition every year?
That is where Greta Weitz is, in Marcus Garvey Park in Upper Manhattan. And there's another look now at Poli. He is running south on the Park Drive, approaching the Plaza of the Nations area at 59th Street and 5th Avenue, where for a moment or two, or rather for a couple of minutes, he will exit the park and run along 59th Street, which New Yorkers call Central Park South. Then at Columbus Circle, where the statue of Christopher Columbus is, he turns to his right, back up into the park, and from there, it's a short sprint to the finish line at Tavern on the Green. The crowd, as you can see, lined up and cheering Poli along the way. Most of them have been reading newspaper articles that focused before the race on Pizzolato and Di Castella and Jama, and most of them probably don't know who Johnny Poli is as they watch him go by.
No, 13th in last August European Championships. Before that, you know, in 1982, he was 13th. So he is quite a surprise. The first American is Pete Fitzinger, about 3 minutes back.
What about the status of American men's marathon running? Some say that because of the money in road racing, because of the number of 10-kilometer races that American road racers enter, there is not going to be, just as there hasn't been for the past few years, a top American male on the world list in marathon running.
Well, I think we're seeing the lull before the storm. I think a couple of things happen. Having the Olympics in this country has gotten our best runners, the 5,000 and 10,000 meter runners, to realize how important the Olympic marathon is. So we have about 5 men. Last year, the #1 10,000 meter runner in the world was Bruce Bickford, an American. This year, it will be Mark Nino, an American. In 2 years, they will move up to the marathon distance, and we will probably have an Olympic medal. But right now, we're staying away from the marathon, as did the first 2 finishers in the last Olympics. They stayed away from it in the 2 years before.
There's a bold prediction. Quote, Marty Liquori says that the United States will probably have an Olympic medal in the marathon at Seoul, South Korea in 1988. I'm going to remember that one, Marty. Meanwhile, Johnny Poli aims toward a possible New York City Marathon Championship. We'll be back right after this. All right, we're going to try to establish a perspective now on how far Rod Di Castella is behind Johnny Poli. As we try this little experiment with race coverage, you're going to see our men's lead vehicle camera move past Di Castella and drive forward now through the park. You can see it is a rather forbidding distance, certainly in the mind of Dick Costella, all the way up to where Johnny Poli is. Still haven't reached it. Moving rapidly, and that does something to the transmission, as you can see. And that's quite a distance. Marty LaCouri, I'd say Dick Costella is certainly up against it at this point.
That's right, and Pizzolato is now in 5th, so somewhere in Central Park, a fat lady is singing.
Now, I suggested earlier, and without trying to get ugly about this topic, it must be covered, that a victory by Poli would arouse further suspicion of blood doping. Do you think people are going to bring that question up?
Oh, I think the top runners are certainly going to bring it up, that a guy who never really was in the top 10 in any major marathon shows up in New York and wins. But it's the same question we've been wrestling with since 1972. Juha Vaatsanen, Finnish runner, winning the 10,000 in the Europeans. Lassi Viren never doing well outside of the Olympics. So we've been wrestling with it in the past 5 years, the research, and older athletes out of conscience or whatever have admitted doing it. So it's always a question, and it's a thing that's tough for our sport because it's undetectable, and there's probably 50% of the runners in the world who would say it's morally fine. It's no worse than taking vitamins. You take a pint of blood out 8 weeks before the race, and you put it in 3 days before, and you run about 2 or 3% better than you would have without it.
Do you believe you're educated enough on the subject to make a personal guess as to whether the top Italian runners engage in blood doping?
I say the top Italian runners, the top Finnish runners, a lot of countries do. I know they do.
Well,
and the top American cyclists have admitted to it. I don't know about the top American runners, but we shouldn't make the fact that it's any country other than America. We're certainly the equal in scientific knowledge of distance running.
And of course we want to leave open the possibility, broad as it is, that this may simply be an outstanding performance by a runner whose nation is producing a legion of good distance runners now, led by the great Alberto Cova, world record holder in the 10,000 meters.
It goes in cycles. There are 1,000 people from Italy who came here just to watch Pizzolato win. So you can imagine the kind of encouragement that all the Italian runners are getting at this point.
They're going to get an unexpected treat, aren't they, Larry Rawson?
Jim, they certainly are. And if Poli loses this race, it'll be a bigger surprise than the Red Sox losing the 6th game to the Mets. He has about 200 yards right now or more on Di Castella. 3rd and 4th is still measurably behind the Di, but he looks terrific. He is up with the balls in his feet. He looks like he would have difficulty splitting the skin of a grape. He looks so light on his feet, and he has less than a mile to go. He's looking around at the crowd. I'm telling you, most of the time they're focused on the ground at this point of the race, but not Poli. He does keep looking behind, though. I'm surprised that he lacks the confidence to feel that Di Castella seemingly is so totally out of it right now. But this is the 3rd Italian victory, it looks like, in 3 years, Jim.
Well, he has just gone through the Grand Army Plaza at the corner of 59th Street and the bottom corner, I should call that the southeast corner of Central Park. He is running along the street we call Central Park South now, a little bit like a tourist as he gazes up at the big hotels to his left and basks in the attention of the beautiful trees and the large crowd in Central Park to his right. In moments, he will turn past the statue of Christopher Columbus at Columbus Circle, where the finish line was for the 1896 American Marathon just 90 years ago, and he will turn back up the Park Drive toward Tavern on the Green and the finish line in the New York City Marathon. At this point, it would be a major and dramatic surprise if anyone wins this race other than Johnny Poli of Italy, who has dominated it ever since making his break up in the South Bronx just after leaving Manhattan.
Well, he decimated the field, and he really hurt Rob Di Castella, who's now given up 2nd place to Ryszard Niemczak from Poland, right there in 2nd place. He's one of the men who laid off the pace for the first 15 miles and is now moving up. He's 30 years old, from Poland, and he has run a fast time on the track for 10,000 meters and run 2:10:34 for the marathon. But to put this into perspective, the Italians have now won 1st and 2nd with a different runner in the European Marathon Championships this summer. They won the first 3 places in the 10,000 meters, and now they have won the New York Marathon for the 3rd time. Certainly, they are the Finns The Finnish athletes did this in the 70s. They're doing it in the 80s.
Curious irony, isn't it, that he's going to collect a German car for winning this race? Of course, the Italians make fine automobiles themselves. Johnny Poli of Italy. That is still Central Park South. You can see the crowd cheering him on. New York, of course, a city rife with people of Italian heritage and Italian background. A lot of people who will be rooting for him just as soon as they hear his last name. And he turns right past that statue of Columbus I've mentioned before and into the park. The home stretch. Tavern on the Green, not yet within his sight, but certainly within the realm of his senses. He knows what's coming up. Almost smiling now.
He's pretty smart. He gets about 100 yards around the turn, and he looks back because he knows he's gone 100 yards, and he's looking for somebody to come around that corner within 100 yards. He's been doing that at every sharp turn for the last 10 miles, so he knows exactly what he's doing. Kind of reminiscent of Frank Shorter. His body style and his style of running.
He is largely reminiscent of Shorter. Thin, willowy like Shorter. Taller, certainly. Height and weight listed here. It'd be interesting to know if he's as tall as Rod Dixon, who was maybe the tallest man ever to win this race.
I doubt if he's as tall as Rod. But I think about 12 o'clock tonight, he and Rod will both be about equally as high.
Well, he's going to have to drink a lot of beer to keep up with Rod, whose New Zealand heritage gives him a major advantage in that regard. 2:10:09. You see how much they slowed down since the blistering first half of the race, and that was a story in and of itself. That first 10 miles was a much faster pace than perhaps most of the runners should have committed themselves to.
The fast pace in the beginning really ruined, in a sense, the race for many of the athletes who were going to finish from 5th place to 10th place because it was an all-or-nothing thing. If you went for that pace, you took the chance of running extremely well or getting nothing. The men who paced themselves, like Nemzak, came up and got second, but many of the runners, all of the African runners, really crashed in the middle of the race.
The championship of this marathon is in Italian hands. Unofficially, 2 hours, 11 minutes, and 6 seconds. It's what we've come to call in New York a very Pizzolato-like time. And there is Anton Nimczak of Poland, 30 years old, who has just finished second behind Poland. Poli of Italy first, Nimczak of Poland second. Well, for a moment there, he looked drained and spent. Now he's starting to get some expression back in his face. This is the first major marathon victory for that young man. And now, Pizzolato in 3rd place, waving to the crowd. De Castella has dropped way back. Pizzolato waves to a crowd which loves him as he comes across the finish line in 3rd. Italians 1st and 3rd.
You have to congratulate him because he made that big move early. He was hurting very much at mile 15, but he stayed in there and plugged away and came back up to get 3rd place in a fairly good time.
So in finishing 3rd, Pizzolato has proven something about himself once again.
I think he may get more respect from the marathoning community for this performance than his previous 2 in New York. This comes on top of the 2nd place in the European Championships.
He underlines his status as a major star, but he was 3rd. He'll be back with the winner after this. And there's a look at Greta Weitz as she heads toward an apparent 8th New York City Marathon victory, not threatened by Lara Fogli of Italy or any other runner since about the 15-mile mark. Very quickly, a major correction on my part. Unfortunately, I am now told by my spotting system that I was incorrect in saying that Pizzolato had finished third. Our camera missed Rob DiCostella in some way, shape, or form, while DiCostella apparently crossed the line in third place. So that answers the mystery of where was Rob DiCostella. He did get in third place. Pizzolato was fourth, and that does nothing, I think, to detract from Pizzolato's accomplishment. It remains, just as you said, Marty LaCourie, another major statement about his particular talent. Now, with that done, let's now go to Larry Rawson with the most important man in the moment, Johnny Poli of Italy, the winner. Larry?
Thank you, Jim. I'm here with his interpreter, Mr. Poletti. Mr. Poletti, could you ask him, you look fresh the entire way. Did he have any problems out there?
Io ho avuto alcuni problemi durante la corsa, tu guardi molto fresco.
Ho corso molto bene fino al 30° chilometro.
I running very well into the tutorial kilometer, yes.
After I have a little problem with the leg, but I finish in good condition. It's my first time that I win a race how marathon, New York Marathon. It's very important for me. I win only 2 marathons. This is the second marathon, but it's the wonderful race. It's the best of the world race.
Gianni, tell me, at what point did you feel that you had beaten Rob DiCostella?
Quale punto della maratona tu pensavi di aver battuto Mr. Rob DiCostella?
Ho pensato di aver battuto DiCostella quando sono arrivato al 35° chilometro.
At the 35 miles, I was
35 kilometers.
I'm sorry, 35 kilometers.
That's 18 and a half miles. Go ahead.
At the 18 and a half miles, I was quite sure to beat Mr. Rob DiCostella.
Talk to me, if you can, in English. What about the crowds? Did they help you?
Parla se puoi tu in inglese.
It's very difficult for me to speak English because I speak only little. The people is wonderful. I ran in all the world, but this is the most important marathon in the world. The people is fantastic, wonderful.
Deke, let me ask you, if I could, for a second. You looked great to me, like at 18 miles, and then what happened?
I don't know. I just started to, find it pretty tough out there. There's nothing that I can put it down to. I just started to get tired. I had a bit of trouble. Had a bit of trouble around about 18, 19 miles with a little bit of a cramp, and Johnny really broke away from me at that stage. And I just never really got back into a good rhythm, and I just started to struggle a little bit.
Now, you held on it.
The pace was just faster than it was.
You held on well, I would say, right up to 23 miles. Were you hoping that your strength might catch him in the park, on the hills?
I was just hoping to keep on going, and I was just trying to maintain my form and concentrate on running as smoothly and trying to finish on as strongly. Or I wasn't finishing on strongly. I was really just trying to slow down as little as I could. But I was really hurting those last few miles.
Thanks. We wish you luck. It was great having you here in New York.
Well, I don't think luck's got much to do with it.
Jim, that's the story here at the finish line. Orlando Pizzolato coming in well, finishing 4th, I believe, in the race. And our winner, another Italian for the 3rd year in a row.
And poetically, Larry, as you look at the final standings, the split times, which Rob DiCostella had written onto the back of his left hand, had smudged into a sort of gray blur. 3rd place is not to be discredited as a finish in the New York Marathon, but it isn't what Rob DiCostella was here to do. There is Greta Weitz, who is doing exactly what she wants to do, headed toward her 8th victory in 9 entries into the New York City Marathon. She's never finished this race without winning it. Her only loss came in 1981 when she was forced out with injury on a day on which Allison Rowe ran what was up to then the fastest marathon time ever recorded by a woman in the sport. And Greta Weitz gets counseling from her husband, Jack Weitz, as she makes her way toward the finish.
The 1986 New York City Marathon. This ABC Sports exclusive is being brought to you by Mercedes-Benz, automotive sponsor of the New York City Marathon. By Planters, the peanuts with fresh roasted taste. By General Electric. At GE, we bring good things to life. And by Michelob, so exceptionally smooth, the night belongs to Michelob.
Another look at Greta Weitz of Norway, who has just passed the 25-mile mark on her way to about a 2-hour, 27-minute tour of the New York Marathon course, which she knows so well. Not one of her faster times here, not one of her slower ones either. A characteristic victory in the New York City Marathon upcoming for Grete Waitz. We'll be watching her finish. We'll be watching her finish very shortly. But first, Marty LaCouri, your final capsule impression of what happened in the men's race won by Johnny Poli of Italy.
Well, I think in retrospect, it's a classic case of the Italians 3 and 4 years ago not even being a factor in the New York Marathon or in any marathon in the world, and Johnny Poli seeing Orlando Pizzolato do it on kind of a fluky day, but that just raised within him the possibility that if that fellow can do it, that I've been running with all these years, that I ran against in college and club meets, I can do it. And that's what happened. He got the confidence, and when the time came for him to strike out on his own, for him to take the lead, not let Di Castello lead, not defer to Orlando Pizzolato, he did it. He did it with a relish on First Avenue, and he put the race away.
And again, the overall story, those are not the only two Italian marathon runners of impact.
Another separate man won the European Championships by just a few seconds over Pizzolato. So they've got a lot to debate. It's like us with the Red Sox and the Mets. Is Pizzolato the better man because he was second in the Europeans and fourth here? Or is Johnny Polo better because he has the Italian record and he won New York this year? I wish we had those debates about the Americans. Our top American was Pete Fitzinger. He finished 9th today.
Give me a quick answer as we look at Grete again. Is Di Castello still #1?
He'll be #1 for this year.
All right, Grete Waitz is making her way now, as you can see, through the familiar environs of Central Park, following the footsteps of Poli and Nimchak and Di Castello and Pizzolato and all the men who have finished before her.
She's going to finish in just outside of 2 minutes, 27 seconds. And let us repeat that people have said that, well, it's not too interesting when Grete wins because Grete always wins, but she is so competitive. She gets the competition early, and today she got him on the hills. First, it was Lisa Martin who dropped back, and then Lara Foley on the bridge. And here she is, the soul of consistency, the quintessential Grete Waitz, running her own race. As you said, it wasn't her best, it wasn't her worst. It was right in the middle of the 8 performances.
Grete fairly bristles at discussions of time. Someone asked her this week if she's interested in running under 2 hours, 20 minutes, something that both Ingrid Christensen and Joan Benoit, her peers in the sport, have said they'd like to do. And she basically discounted it as a goal.
Let me interrupt you, Jim. There is Lisa Martin, and this was a great race for second place. Lisa caught up to Lara Foley at about 22 miles, passed her, and now is coming into second. You can see from the back view there that she is working at it and is laboring. But here is Grete with no problems at all. You're right about that 220 barrier. She feels that maybe the women are running themselves into the ground worrying about it. She said, I stay at peace and I run for a long time because I don't worry about time. I'm a competitor. We sure saw that today.
She also said that she seriously doubts whether she will ever again appear in the same race with Joan Benoit Samuelson and Ingrid Christensen. It only happened once at the Olympic Games in Los Angeles in 1984. A lot of us thought that Grete might have been disappointed with her silver medal there. She said absolutely not. She was quite happy to win silver on that day.
You must remember, though, that with the exception of Joan Benoit, Grete has beaten a who's who of women's running, including Catalano, Brown, Muller, and Christensen herself in New York and elsewhere. And so when she says she doesn't plan on meeting them again, that, she says, is a difference in schedules, not really planning. That Christensen, for instance, still wants to stay on the track. Grete says one reason why I can stay and keep my life as an athlete and keep injury-free relatively is to stay off the track, keep away from that speed work. So she says, I'm going to let Ingrid chase those medals and those victories and those championships. I'm going to go for the wins.
Indeed, Ingrid has said that even though she has beaten Waitz, she still holds a slight measure of awe for her. And though she's run faster times, she has a certain Grete complex which will never entirely be eliminated from her psyche. Now, you brought us back to point 1. This is perhaps significant mostly to Grete as the race in which she proved to herself that the injuries she suffered this summer didn't really hamper her.
Well, let me say this, that Joanie Benoit has taught all of us Americans that sometimes you take off with a bit of time from an injury and it rests you. Grete said to me, maybe my rest from the European Championships in August has made me more ready for New York, and I think that is certainly the case.
And I used the word once before, I'll return to it again. Inscrutable. She does not look largely different now than she looked in the first 4 miles of the race.
She keeps calm and keeps serene. She just concentrates. She is a very, very great competitor and simply concentrates on the task at hand. Obviously, she knew those two women were with her, but she just wasn't going to get rattled.
Is it too much of a generalization to say that it is a Scandinavian quality?
Probably is, but anyway, it's a nice look, and Norwegians are known to be cold in cold weather or cool, and they don't get ruffled. Certainly, if that's the image, Greta lives up to it.
One of the parts of the public relations job that she's now involved in promoting herself as one of the world's 3 best women marathoners is a post she has now taken in helping to promote tourism in Norway. She says that that is not an easy thing for her to do, but that she loves the country of Norway, where she was born and has lived all of her life, and she would like for other people to appreciate it more as she does. And now let's just bask for a moment in the crowd's response to Greta's victory. From Norway, victory number 8.
And she's smiling now, Jim, as well she should. This appears to be really one of her easier runs. She doesn't seem to be distressed. I have never quite seen her so relaxed and waving to the crowd as she came into the finish.
She's 33 years old. She doesn't know how much longer she is going to be doing this, but certainly she does not appear to be slowing down or showing signs of wear and tear in any way whatsoever.
Jim, let's say this, she's still improving. And here's second place, Lisa Martin. Oh, she's working at it, but it's a good second place for her. She's certainly looking toward that finish line.
And certainly the disappointment of losing to Greta will be somewhat ameliorated by the fact that she dropped the 3rd and then came back and got Lara Foley.
That's right. That was a very, very good competition, and certainly one Lara ran the race of her career. But Lisa, catching her mid-race and coming back and showing how competitive she really is. Lisa Martin is a very, very tenacious and unafraid competitor. And I think if anybody is going to be Greta, it's going to be this lady right here. Lisa is now going to wait around and wait for her father to finish. Her father from Australia is running in the race with her.
So is Rob DiCostella's father, Rolette DiCostella. Family affair, New York City Marathon. We'll be back with Greta Weitz.
How many people, when they win a major race, you say to them, which was a sweeter victory, the first or the second time? For you, I have to say, was it the first? Was it the 7th? Was it the 3rd? Or was it the 8th? It was a lot of pressure coming in this year, wasn't there?
Yes, I feel that every time I now run New York, the pressure is getting bigger and bigger. Everybody takes it more or less for granted that I shall win. And I had to explain to people that the race is tough and the competition this year was very good with Lisa Martin and Lara Foley.
Were you surprised by Lara Foley? I mean, she has never stuck that close for so long.
No, and I heard also that she had some problems with her foot or leg, so I was very surprised that she was running with us for so long.
I was just curious, the crowd, you never do look around until the very last 10 yards, but when you come by, they get so excited, they throw flowers, they're so appreciative of you. You're truly a celebrity here. Do you feel it? Does it help you?
Yes, it really helps, and that is what makes the New York City Marathon very special to me. The crowds along the course, they are so supportive, and it's very nice for a Norwegian to experience that.
I suppose it's not fair to ask, so close to the end, you've just done it the 8th time. It's a fantastic accomplishment. Will we see number 9 from Greta Weitz?
I don't know if I have to tell you how I feel right now. I would say this is the last, but you never know. I said that after last year too, so maybe I'll come back.
On behalf of all of New York, hearty congratulations, Greta. Let's get a quick word with Lisa Martin. Lisa, congratulations to you also. Tell me what happened on the Pulaski Bridge. You just very quickly dropped 25 yards or so behind on the hill there.
I felt uncomfortable at the start, and I felt really bad at halfway, and it was odd. I was, hanging on for 3rd place, and then when we got off the Queensboro Bridge and got onto 1st Avenue, I felt really good, and I started running 5:30 mile pace. So the last 10K was by far my best, and I really bowled in home, and I knew I was gaining all the time, but I just left it far too late. I have no idea why I felt so bad at the beginning. It's just the way it went.
Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that this whole week, maybe even 2 weeks, the whole town has been saying it's no longer a one-woman race. There's somebody else out here of quality. It's going to be a two-horse race. Did you feel that in the beginning, maybe?
should have helped me. The pace that we were running was about the same that I ran in Scotland when I ran a 2:26 marathon. So it should have felt comfortable, but it just felt so different from when I was running in Scotland. It felt uncomfortable, my legs felt achy. And, you know, that's the scary thing about the marathon. You can do everything right in preparation and you're not sure what will happen on the day. So I'm just pleased that I hung in there, and I think I was about 15 seconds closer to her this year than last year, which means I have to do this 4 more times before I beat her.
Well, let's face it, 1986 has brought you into the best of the world.
I've had a good year, and I'm ready for a holiday. She's just an awfully good runner.
You are too. Congratulations, Lisa.
All right, thank you very much, Diana. And we'll be back to wrap this up very shortly. I'd be remiss, incidentally, if I didn't take a moment to thank our 2 researchers, Barry Brown and Roger Robinson, in the studio, and our medical expert, Dr. Paul Thompson. What you've seen in the last 3 hours represents only the beginning and a small part of the finish of the New York City Marathon. By now, only a tiny percentage of the 20,000 who left the Verrazano Narrows Bridge this morning have crossed the finish line. In fact, there's a much larger number of runners who have not yet gotten out of Queens and into Manhattan. This day belongs partially to the big stars, but mostly to them. Now, thanks for being with us.
The New York City Marathon is conducted under the auspices of the New York Roadrunners Club, President Fred LeBeau and Vice President Alan Steinfeld, with the cooperation of the City of New York, particularly the New York City Police Department. This ABC Sports exclusive has been brought to you by Mercedes-Benz, automotive sponsor of the New York City Marathon, by Better Cheddar's Snack Bins, another fine Nabisco product, by Michelob, so exceptionally smooth, the night belongs to Michelob, and by The Equitable, your key to financial opportunity. Coming up next over most of these ABC stations this week with David Brinkley, travel arrangements made through and a promotional fee paid by United Airlines. United flies more people to Hawaii than any other airline. Nobody knows Hawaii like United. This has been a presentation of ABC Sports, recognized around the world as the leader in sports television.